We'll go ahead and bring the March 2nd, 2023 Board of Adjustment meeting to order. We can all, I'm sorry, Madam Secretary, would you please determine a quorum?
Clay Thomas,
Here.
Don Christensen,
Here.
Rob Pierce,
Here.
Brad Stanley,
Here.
Kathy Julian.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Large, ethics law announcement, please.
Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming in before the board today, you've received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest, you have a commitment in a private capacity such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, or you provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. You must furthermore abstain from the deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation will materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you had contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd, the all-important appeal procedure, please.
Thank you. Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and you qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal it in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you. Next is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. However, action may not be taken on any matter raised during the public comment period until the matter is specifically listed on the agenda as an action item. Comments to be made to the Board of Adjustment as a whole. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone in chambers or via Zoom wishes to speak at this time?
We have one public comment in chambers. Please state your name for the record.
Everybody, for the record, my name is Mark Noonan, and I'm also on the Sun Valley Gap Citizens Advisory Board. I'm here to speak in for some of our citizens of Sun Valley. Originally, when the Chocolate Drive project came to the meeting at the Hobie's Casino, it was a lot of people that lived right in that area where we're not very polite to some of them. But most of them, just like any of you, if you had a beautiful empty lot across the street from your house for 40 years, somebody comes in and says they're building apartments, you'd probably be a little upset about it anyway. But for the most part, the residents of Sun Valley were okay with houses because it was originally zoned under the Sun Valley General Master Plan to be a medium density, 3 houses per acre. And even another development down the road, we even allowed them to go up to 4.6 houses per acre. There were single family homes, and people of Sun Valley were okay with that. So down the road, the Planning Commission voted on it as well. All of the members said no to it, except for one said yes. The Citizens Advisory Board was against apartments. The whole meeting itself was against apartments. And when it came to the county commissioners kind of like said, okay, and it was a 4-to-1 vote that said yes. High density at the very end of Sun Valley with very poor access. When item E comes up, I'll show a presentation on the traffic situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. From staff, is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time?
I have no hands raised via Zoom.
No more public comment in chambers.
Thank you very much. Moving on, approval of the March 2nd, 2023 agenda. Before we do that, is there any discussion on this matter? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Second.
I second.
Oh, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is the approval of February 2nd, 2023 draft minutes. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
This is Rob, so moved.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
Mr. Stanley, seconds. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next item up is public hearing items. First one on the agenda is administrative case permit number WAD MIN 23-0001 Cosin Garage. And I believe we have Ms. Wyke as the presenter.
Correct. And hopefully you all can hear me. Thank you for accommodating the remote option for me to present today due to road conditions. I'm sure Kathy, Ms. Julian's in the same boat. Okay, so let me go ahead and I will pull up the presentation for you. Okay. Since no one's shouting, it's not being seen, I'm assuming you all can see it. So Courtney Wyke, Senior Planner. The case before you is W Admin 23-001 for Cosin Garage. This is a request to approve an administrative permit for a roughly 4,000 square foot detached accessory structure, which is larger than the primary residence. The parcel has an existing 2,700 square foot single family dwelling. The property is located at 745 Linterna in the Spanish Springs area plan. It is zoned general rural. Accessory structures that are larger than the main residence are allowed outright on parcels larger than 40 acres in the general rural regulatory zone. However, since the parcel is less than 40 acres, approximately 10.03 acres, the proposed accessory structure is subject to approval of an administrative permit. The subject property is generally flat. Adjoining lots are developed with single-family dwellings and contain several accessory buildings similar. Existing and proposed development on the subject parcel is consistent with the development in the surrounding area. As shown on the site plan above, the location meets all, or the proposed location meets all applicable setbacks of the general rural regulatory zone and for defensible space requirements. I actually already went over that. Apologize. So I'm going to skip that part. The proposed structure will be stick built with metal siding and have stone veneer accents on the lower portion of the structure's perimeter. The metal siding is required to be non-reflective per condition 1F of the conditions of approval. The structure has a maximum height of 27 feet and is within the maximum height allowance. The floor plan includes a small covered patio, a mechanical room, half bathroom, an upper level mezzanine storage area, and a main floor for RV, boat, and storage space. All appropriate noticing was followed. 36 properties were notified of the application. No comments were received either for or in opposition. All applicable agencies also reviewed the request and provided no opposition. We only actually had one agency, Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, that provided conditions of approval, which indicated that the structure must comply with all applicable fire codes. Staff does believe all required findings for approval can be made, and I have provided a motion for your consideration. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Make this bigger.
I have one quick one for you. Within the actual documentation, page 19, Exhibit B, and Mr. Lloyd, maybe you can help me out here. It's attached and it's the NRS 534-180, and what's highlighted is it says obtain approval, and this has to do with wells, obtain approval for that use or purpose from the local governing body or planning commission in whose jurisdiction the well is located. Does that mean that this has to go before the planning commission, or is it suffice that we can handle it here?
No, in this case, and that's a statutory requirement, typically the planning commission would grant the authority to approve to the appropriate governing agency. So no, it would not need to go before the planning commission. That's not my understanding.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Thank you. Is the applicant present? Do they wish to speak on this item?
The applicant is available via Zoom. I have Greg Cosin. If you could please unmute and state your first and last name for the record.
Yeah, my name's Greg Cozen, and I'm here for any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close that and open it for public comment. Staff, is there any public comment on this item?
Right here.
Oh, sir, if you'd like to make public comment, please go to the stadium and state your first and last name for the record. And if you could see us after to fill out a public comment card. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Clark Carter, born and raised here. My parents, I'm here on their behalf, Sid and Luana Carter. They own a adjoining property, which the aforesaid driveway into the Cosin property runs right by. My only question would be, just looking through the paperwork, is there any potential for rental space out of that accessory structure, being there's 3 15 to 16-foot garage doors, stalls within that structure? And then also any road improvement that might need to be addressed on that drive down to their property. I know at the bottom corner, it runs through a natural drainage, which has washed out in the past. That would be my questions to date.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you wish to add?
That would be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, are there additional comments from the public?
We have no further public comment in chambers or via Zoom.
Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Chair, I think the question that was asked about usage is a good one. I wonder if we could ask the applicant that question, if they're still available.
If
Yeah.
I may, Mr. Cozen, I'm going to speak on, respond if that's appropriate. Courtney Waikey, Senior Planner for the record. The approval or request to you today is for an accessory structure, which is a garage or storage for, his RV, the RVs and boats. There is no approval or no proposal for an accessory dwelling. It does not have all of the components that would make it a dwelling unit and therefore would be allowed to be rented. In fact, I believe, and I can pull it up, but it's the last condition for planning. Let's see, it's 1G. We actually have a deed restriction that will be required, stating that the structure will not be used for dwelling purposes. If the applicant was to want to convert this into a dwelling, they would have to go through that process, which would require a similar type of permit and administrative review permit. Mr. Cosin can speak to if he has any interest in doing that down the line, but today the application is solely for the use of a garage or a detached accessory structure.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
A
Stanley.
follow-up for a little bit more clarification. Other than an accessory dwelling for living purposes, was there any indication, is it designed for personal use or no commercial intent?
Yeah, this is the applicant speaking, Greg. No, this dwelling is for my personal use and just storage of my personal property and not to be used for renting out to outside people or whatever.
Thank you for confirming that.
Thank you. Is there any more further questions or discussions on this matter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Rob. I'll make a motion. I move that after giving reasonable consideration information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve administrative permit case number WAD MIN 23-0001 for Greg and Kathy Cozen, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Development Code Section 110.808.25, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effects on a military installation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I
For the
second.
excuse me, go ahead.
Kathy Jillian for the record, I second.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Next item up on the agenda is administrative permit case number WAD MIN 23-0002 LaCroix Barn, and I believe Planner Olander will be addressing this issue.
And Julie, you'll want to turn it on.
Need to be turned on. Good afternoon, Julie Olander with Planning and Building.
She should be good.
So this is a request for administrative permit similar to the previous one you heard. This is for a 2,867 square foot detached accessory structure that's larger than the main structure, which is 2,490 square feet. And it's located out off of Red Rock Road. You can see where Red Rock Road is, and then you can see a sort of a closer view of the property. So the parcel, as the previous one, is zone GR, and however, it's only a 12-acre parcel, so that makes it fall under the low density rural requirements. And they are have a setback of 30 feet in the front and 50 in the 30 in the front and rear and 50 feet on the sides. And then the structure will meet that. Also, the structure is only going to be 18 feet and 7.5 inches, which meets the height requirement of LDR. And then concerning the lot coverage, it will meet the lot coverage requirement, which is either 80,000 square feet or 10% of the lot. So it's going to be considerably under that. The proposed structure is a prefab metal barn, and the walls will be painted a light gray and the roof is a forest green. And the barn will have 7 stalls and a tack area. The barn will not have electricity or be connected to water. And here is sort of a layout of where the house is and where the proposed barn is going to be located. And then this is a floor plan. You can see where the stalls are in the tack area to the top of the screen. And these are some elevations. There was no neighborhood meeting required. 37 parcels were noticed. I didn't receive any phone calls or emails. And this was routed to various departments and agencies, and those comments are included in your conditions of approval. Staff is able to make all the findings, and I provide a possible motion, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff? Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Chair, Planner Olander, I'm going to ask the same question here that was asked by one of the neighbors earlier and that we asked the last applicant as well. Do we know whether or not this is a private or commercial endeavor or any contemplation of being commercial?
At this point, as far as they present, it's private. They have to only house their own horses on the property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, I have one question for
Mr. Christian.
Ms. Olander. Were there any comments or objections that were posed by the neighbors when they were sent their mailing?
I did not receive any emails or phone calls.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Any
have a
addition-
query.
Yes, Ms. Julian.
Yes, I think the table on page 7 needs to be updated for the actual comments because because I believe there were conditions. I believe there are conditions that are not reflected there from the environmental health agency. Can you look into that? I don't see any X's there, but they did respond with some conditions.
Yeah, this is Julie Olander with Planning and Building. There's conditions in my conditions of approval from James English. He has 2 conditions. It's on page, I think page 15 of the staff report.
Yeah, yes.
Or
and
13,
simply
okay.
The staff report that needs to be updated, the table on page 7.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
right.
I didn't
Okay,
click that
right.
box. Okay,
Exactly.
I apologize for that.
Okay, and secondly, is there any provision, I think someone mentioned about the non-reflective roofs and non-reflective roof and all that good stuff. Is there a reason why that hasn't been included in this application?
This is the applicant's providing an already existing barn. This is not a barn that's being constructed for the site. So it's already constructed. So
Oh, I
it
see.
is,
Okay,
it is the way it is.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Olander. Is the applicant present and wish to speak on this matter?
Please state your name for the record.
My name's Dan McGill. I'm a retired civil engineer, and I'm a, neighbor and a friend of the applicant. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Oh, thank you. Again, the staff is the applicant present and wishing to discuss this. The applicant. We're not public comment. We're looking for the applicant. Right.
He stated that he was representing the applicant.
You
As-
were representing the applicant. Okay, because you said you were a neighbor, so I didn't know if you were speaking under the public comment or representing or being the representative for the applicant. But okay, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and accept that. With that being done, we'll go ahead and close that and open it to public comment. Staff, is there any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment in chambers or any hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you very much. We will go ahead. Actually, I do have one question. Mr. McGill, would you come back up here, please? Guess I should have asked you this before I got confused. Just to reiterate what was said by staff, that this is for private use, is that correct?
That's the intention. It's a fairly large barn, but it was previously constructed on another property about 20 years ago, north of the proposed site. And they no longer wanted it. And so the applicant acquired it. So it's been on her property for a while. And I'm helping her get a building permit.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we went on record with that. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this matter?
Seems like a clean project.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Rob, I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I move that after giving reasonable consideration, information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, Washington County Board of Adjustments approve administrative permit case number WADMIN 23-0002 for Elizabeth Law Croaks. If I said that wrong, I apologize. With the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washington County Development Code Section 110.808.25, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effect on a military installation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Stanley seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 22-0036 Southwind Drive grading. And we have senior planner Franzik who will be addressing this issue.
Good afternoon, Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. We're looking at WSUP 22-0036. This is south wind grading. This is located within the South Valleys area plan. The subject parcel is zone general rural. This is in an area off of Joy Lake Road, accessed through St. James Village, and it's surrounded by similar parcels, similar sized parcels of 5 acres. Those surrounding parcels are either vacant or developed with single family dwellings. Before you is provided a site map. The request is for major grading to construct a driveway for a proposed single family home and detached garage. The applicant, as part of the request, is requesting to modify a single grading standard. I want to highlight 2 things associated with this site plan. To the far right along the property line where the driveway enters or starts, they've provided a decent amount of turnaround space, acting as a sort of almost like a cul-de-sac type turnaround for anybody who comes down that driveway. The additional item is between the proposed residence and the proposed detached garage. They are providing a large paved area that is part of fire's required conditions. And so I want to note those specifically because it does impact the proposed grading and the proposed design. So the request associated with it, the 3 triggers are the importation of 1,000 cubic yards on sites that are 15% or greater in slope, a driveway that traverses 30% or greater slope, and then grading to construct a permanent earthen structure greater than 4.5 feet within the front yard setback. The overall quantities that were proposed are 970 cubic yards of cut, 1,250 cubic yards of fill, with 1.75 acres of disturbance. The request to modify a standard is specific to 438-45C. This is relatively common to see requested to be modified. It is, the code requires or limits the max difference from natural slope to be no greater than 10 feet. In this case, the max cut that they are proposing is 14.3 feet and the max fill is 19 feet. Due to the existing topography of the site, staff does support this requested modification. Staff did go to the site for a site visit last year, and upon going to the site, it was witnessed that the applicant had conducted unpermitted grading. So the unpermitted grading, as you can see, is in the outline above the dashed lines and the primary driveway cut. The intent, the original intent and the reason why this unpermitted grading took place was for the applicant, the property owner, to conduct perk tests and leach field trench test. While the leach field test and the perk test, the grading associated with that is exempt under Article 438, the grading to get access to this location is not. When staff found out about the unpermitted grading, we requested the applicant go back, modify their request, address the unpermitted grading, add the additional cut fill that they did, and resubmit. The applicant did exactly that, but I want to note that while the grading is unpermitted, or originally was unpermitted, it did ultimately follow the proposed driveway that is before you. So this, part of this grading permit is to also rectify that unpermitted grading. So this image shows the SUP's applicable areas. As mentioned before, this is on a relatively steep slope. And as you can see with the image above, with the red and the black outlines, those are those 30-foot or 30% or greater slope areas and where that fill will be required. And this is just the primary site plan that was provided to staff. Again, we do call out that vehicle turnaround at the end of Southwind Drive. That was created as part of the result of that unpermitted grading. And they used it to hopefully create a beneficial option for people who take a wrong turn down Southwind. Within the South Valley's area plan, there is a specific area plan policy that is required to meet all the findings for a special use permit approval. And that finding is specifically South Valley's 2.16, which states that there must be a finding included that the community character, as described in the character statement, can be adequately conserved through mitigation of any identified potential negative impacts. Through the analysis of the application that was submitted, as well as the conditions of approval that were provided by the various agencies that review this, staff is confident that we can make this finding. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. A motion can be found on page 10 of your staff report, and I've also provided a motion above for you. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Mr. Stanley.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr.
For the record, Don Christensen. Would it be safe to say that, well, let me back up. This board is always interested in pre-existing unpermitted violations, if you will, though we're not an enforcement board. But the point being, would it be safe to say, in your opinion as the planner and your staff, that the plan for the finished product of this grading, though it exceeds the normal standards for grade slope and whatnot, sufficiently, I hate to use the word covers the sins, but sufficiently mitigates the work that was unpermitted, and that this is an improvement overall in the grading plan?
So this is definitely an improvement specifically for that turnaround that was created. As mentioned, the unpermitted grading, they jumped the gun. They went ahead and went through this process specifically to do the percolation test and the leach field test. This special use permit request, while it does cover the driveway, is also intended to address and rectify that unpermitted grading.
Okay, so then we can interpret that to mean that you, as the planner, are satisfied with the overall results.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff?
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Julian.
Thank you, Kathy Julian, for the record. On page 14, I think there is a typo in the condition that should be corrected before any consideration of the motion, and that is it's if special use permit is approved, blah blah blah, and approval based on condition 5B. You have in there condition 2. I think that was taken directly from the comment from the agency, but that would be a typo here.
I can make those changes.
And I'm sorry, just for clarification, Board Member Julian, which condition are you referring to specifically?
5C on page 14.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Stanley.
If I may. First of all, Chris, thank you for the remark or the analysis that included that it conforms to the area plan. I'm going to follow up, if you don't mind, on a question that Don had asked a little differently. And it's out of curiosity as much as anything else. Would there have been another easier way to get a successful test done and the leach field confirmation done? I mean, did you need to grade your way up there?
I think that might be a better question for the applicant.
Okay.
The only thing that I could state is, had the applicant waited, gone through the special use permit process, the grading that would have gone through to do those tests would have been covered under the SUP and would have been legal at that time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
There is also the conservation group had asked a question about tree replacement for the trees that are lost in the grading process and building process and so forth. Is that addressed here?
So they're, as part of their application, with their amended application, due to some of that unpermitted grading, they are saving additional trees. It should be mentioned that the Conservation District is advisory, so we do take their conditions into consideration, but we did not put that specifically to save a tree.
Okay, and to put a fine point on that, if you don't mind, I'm reading that as a no. And do we know how many new trees, if any, would be planted and how many existing trees would be lost?
I think that would be also a better
For the
question for
applicant?
the applicant. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just have, I guess it's for my own edification. So if I understand this correctly, not to beat a dead horse here, it's okay to grade, to do a perk test and a septic test. It's just not okay to grade to get to the location to do it. So what we did here is we just put the cart in front of the horse is really what happened.
That is correct. So the actual grading, the volumes, the calculations associated with the specific testing is exempt from Article 438. The issue at hand is they graded a path, driveway, et cetera, to get to the location to adequately do those tests, and that's what was unpermitted.
And once it was brought to their attention, they returned it to the best they could, original condition, and then came forward basically to have an SUP.
As far as I know, they did not return it to the original condition. What they did was they took the already done work and they included it as part of the overall application, again, to address that unpermitted grading.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that. Any more questions for staff? Mr. Stanley.
Just one. And Chris, I didn't see anything here. We've been asking for mobilization times. Is the area densely populated enough to, in your opinion, to require that mobilization clause that we've been adding recently, or is it independent or remote enough where that might not be an issue?
It's certainly much more sparse in population. However, I have no issues with adding that specific condition. That is part of code anyway, so they would still have to meet that requirement.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. We'll go ahead and close that. And, is the applicant present, and do they wish to speak on this matter?
Please state your name for the record.
For the record, Dave Snellgrove. I'm planning and right-of-way manager with CFA, working with Loomis and Associates, who did the engineering drawings on the site. I appreciate the question. I'll try and cover them. I may end up missing some of them, so if there's a question that you had before that I don't end up covering through the presentation, please let me know. Chris always does a very good job in his presentation, so most of the time I get up and I have to think, okay, I already covered that. So I'll go through some of these first slides very quickly. Locationally, the property is accessed through an access easement called Southwind Drive. It's a 5-acre series of lots that run east to west. The two lots that are directly to the west currently are built in similar fashion with single-family residences on them. The property is zoned for GR, and housing like this is allowed on a 5-acre lot in a GR area, which is what it was intended to be. So down at the bottom left-hand corner, this is probably one that's a little more germane. I kind of wish I'd made it a little bit bigger. On the right, I show where Southwind Drive goes, and there's a 50-foot easement that comes down through St. James Village and then heads to the east. And that continues on across our property. That 50-foot easement actually goes down and touches the property, goes into the property that is a big triangle over between Joy Lake Road, where you see the I-580 and our parcel. The owner of that property, I did have a chance to speak with her outside, and I know she had some questions about it and probably get up and speak. And we will maintain that 50-foot access easement will remain, but I'll explain some challenges to it later. The map on the bottom left shows the darker lots are areas that are already lotted in St. James Village, and those lighter color lots are future lots that are approved but can't be finalized until they get a sewer system, which is coming closer at some point. They'll get there, but what will happen is there will be lots that actually come right down to the north property line of these 5-acre lots that are in St. James Village. This is just the recorded map that shows the 50-foot easement that comes down through St. James Village. Zoning and master plan, Chris went through. We're rural in the master plan and general rural in the zoning. These 5-acre lots are basically grandfathered in. Typically, you'd have a 40-acre lot size in GR. These have been, best I could find, it was in the early 70s that they were created. So they've been there for quite some time, predating your current zoning on the properties. This is a view of the property, and it's kind of hard to see with the snow, but they have over on the right-hand side, there's an existing home. It's actually a yellow house when you're driving by. You can see it. That's the neighboring property. Where we've situated the house is downhill. This proposed house is downhill from that house, so there won't be any view blockage. And it's on the western side of the parcel, so it's closer to their property line, but it's significantly below, and they have a later picture that'll help show that. The site will be visible from I-580 and I guess from Joy Lake Road as well. But because of the contour and terrains that goes up, you'll be able to see only a limited amount of the grading. We do have a series of walls. You might be able to catch a glimpse of some of those, but those are just to deal with the steep slopes that we have on the property. This map is a slope map, and it goes through some opportunities and constraints. Over on what you have now, I've turned the parcel sideways, so north is actually to the right. On that northern property line, you can see a narrow area. That's our side yard setback, but then the wider dashed area, that's the 50-foot easement that's on the property that will be maintained there. They'll be able to get down that. I mean, practically, you can't go straight down that 30% or steeper slope. The red areas on that map are 30%, so to drive straight down that easement, you're not going to be able to create a legal access to the property. In all likelihood, what they need to do is work something and kind of zigzag it and serpentine it through there to work better with the grades. And I'd anticipate that the owner of the property will have no problem working with them. That's not a developed area of the property at all. It's not intended to be developed. And if the property owner adjacent needed that, I wouldn't see any reason why that could not be accommodated. So what we have, this other area, it's green. It doesn't show very well, but the green area right up, which would be the northwestern corner of the property where Southwind Drive currently ends, there's about 4,250 square feet in that area that's not encumbered by setbacks or the 50-foot easement that you could build a house without affecting 30% or steeper slopes. So looking at this site, we have the steepest sustained slopes on the parcel. They're just below where we have the road. The best area for development is kind of a mix. There's some 0 to 15% slopes. There's more 0 to 15% in that area. You get some 15 to 30%, and then you get a little bit of 30% too. But that removes the house from being right next door to the neighboring property, so you don't get the view blockage situation. Plus, you get to a very good place to work with on the site. And then down at the far, that would be the eastern side of the site is down at the bottom. That's reasonably developable with a lot of 15 to 20% slopes. Very hard to access just because you have that swath of 30% or steeper that cuts across right where the driveway comes in. You have to cross it at some point. So that trips one of the requirements that we have in this special use permit right there. There was no way we could make a driveway come in, get to any reasonable portion of the site without affecting a driveway going over 30% or steeper slopes. So Chris put this map up. I do want to illustrate and highlight that the darker colored grade lines in there they reflect the grading that was done, the unpermitted grading. What happened, we went out, Loomis and I, neither of us knew that this had occurred before, went out to the site with Chris, and Chris looked at it and he goes, oh, there's some work that's been done. And he determined, yes, this did in fact exceed special use permit requirements and required that we go out and get the contours for what's there. We didn't have those. Thankfully, it was we got out there right before one of our storms hit. And pretty much the site's been covered with snow, a lot of snow, for quite some time at this point. But that smaller area inside that has the darker lines is where the unpermitted grading happens. So you can see at a point, it stops, and down about here is where the leach field testing was. Once they got down there, they were able to follow the contour lines and just drive over some of the vegetation very easily. But they had to get down that 30% or steeper slope, which constituted a lot of the grading. There was a comment that was made earlier. I can't recall whether it was from one of the board members or from Chris about jumping the gun. Yes, in fact, they jumped the gun. The fortunate part in this case, and I don't always have cases like this, I've represented a lot of things that have happened without permission in the past. This one did follow where we were going to be grading anyway. There's only a very little part that we're actually going to bring back. That dark area there, it's kind of a half circle or half oval. That area right there, oh, thank you. That area right there is actually a part that got graded that we'll bring back to natural. There's a tree right up in that area we're gonna end up saving out of this. So we don't need to keep that grading and that dirt that was sloughed off. We'll pull that back. So here's a picture from uphill. On the one on the right, looks down and shows approximately where the proposed house site is. You can see the grading that was done in the trough to get down that steeper slope. And then over on the left-hand side, you can see the yellow house on the left-hand side there. And you can see the cut that was made, and that's through the steepest area. That's the 30% or steeper area. You see how that little knoll comes out? That's where the best developable spot on the property is for a variety of reasons. I'm not, in the left-hand picture, I'm not all the way at the house site. It's even a little bit farther down the hill from me. But you can see the grade separation. That confirms no view blockage. There is quite a bit of grade separation from where the house will be located to the existing house. Chris showed this map, went over it. These are the 30% or steeper areas that are applicable. And you can see in our drive line that we go across the fewest portions of 30% or steeper slope. We actually follow the contours a little bit better through that area. That's what makes putting the driveway in that area the best choice. And I think that may help to answer one of the questions that came out earlier. This is our overall cut and fill map. Part of our request is for cuts and fills in excess of 10 feet. The purple area is the area of fill in excess of 10 feet. There's a little reddish orangish area up off the driveway on the western side, which is at the top. That's our cut area in excess of 10 feet. This is the site plan. I want to illustrate just a couple things Chris went through. The vehicle turnaround area. We've got a fire access turnaround. These two areas right here are our leach field areas. What's required with the leach field is that you propose where your first leach field area is going to be, but you also identify where a backup leach field would be if your first leach fields were to fail. So we've got that backup leach field area identified. It's not shown as being graded. It would only be graded at any time if their leach field failed, if it ever failed. So those are identified on the site plan. I'm going to make sure that we called those out. These are the house elevations. There was a comment earlier, and you may bring up the question about glare producing roofs. This is a composite shingle roofing. I don't think it has a glare potential to it. I heard that in the last two cases, so I figured I'd answer that question right now. This is a site plan that shows the house has the funky contours around it, and then we have a garage, a single level garage off to the north side. This shows the areas that will be graded and revegetated. All the light green areas are going to exist as natural vegetation, which is a predominance of this 5-acre site. The total disturbed area of the site was equivalent to 1.75 acres out of the total 5-acre parcel. So there's not even half of the site will be graded, and we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. And with that, I will close my presentation and be available for any questions. The one thing I would like to point out on the leach field testing, it's a very important part of your consideration for development and what you're going to face. All I can do is stand here and apologize on behalf of the owner of the property. They didn't realize, and whoever they had to go out and do that testing didn't realize that they were crossing a threshold. That is incorporated into our overall grading. We went out, did extra topo work to make sure that we captured that appropriately in this application. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Is there any questions for this gentleman?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stanley?
Thank you. Mr. Snellgrove, the question was raised in one of our advisory inputs to our process about how many trees would be lost, how many will be replaced, and can you talk to that?
Let me see if any of the maps have the tree locations on it in full. Billy Anderson should be online on the Zoom call if you can locate him. He's the engineer on the project. If I can go back to one of my slides, or I may need.
I can answer that if needed.
There's Billy.
Billy Anderson with Loomis and Associates, for the record. There'll be 3 trees lost due to the grading.
Yeah, I think the other part of that question is, and a request from the advisory agency is to replace those. Is there an intent to do that?
Yeah, we don't have a full landscape plan for this. That's not part of the submittal requirements for this type of work. However, around their revegetated and landscape area, they will be planting trees, and I'm sure they'll go equal to or greater than that number. And they're probably going to be pretty sensitive to wanting to block their own views with future vegetation, but trees will be planted in and along the driveway. I'd imagine that the number of trees will far outstrip the number lost. However, I can't state that as a 100% fact, but I'm pretty sure they will have trees in their landscaping.
All right, thank you. And if I may, one question for, as out of curiosity as much as anything else, the snow picture, what is the maximum grade on the driveway?
That's probably another one that Billy can answer off the top of his head. Billy?
Yeah, Billy Anderson, for the record, 14%, and we worked that out with Truckee Meadows Fire as well to make sure that that's acceptable to them, and it was.
Yeah, that's the max percent for a driveway. I couldn't recall if we were going lower. Yeah. And that's what that 50-foot easement that goes straight down the slope, that's where they'll need to work with it. And there's probably a way to do that in cooperative working between the neighbors to make something happen in the future, but they'd need to deal with that as part of their building application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Mr. Snellgrove? Seeing none, thank you very much. Go ahead and close that. We'll ask staff if there is any public comment or any public wishing to speak on this item.
I have Amanda Hald in Chambers. Please state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Amanda Hald, and I own the 17-acre parcel right underneath where they're wanting the grading permit. So my concerns are the excess grading could create an obstruction for our potential new build. And this is uncharted territory, obviously, because none of this land is developed. So that is why I'm here today, just to make sure that you all know that there we will be building there, and some of these permits can have an effect on the surrounding properties. So I would like you to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no further public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this item?
Yes, Kathy Julian for the record. I would appreciate it if staff could respond to that last query made or elaborate to the board on that last query made about the potential impact on view.
We can bring staff back up then.
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. So while we recognize that there are parcels surrounding this request, without formal plans, it's unknown how this potential project could impact development plans that have not been submitted. As of right now, the development plans that have been submitted for the application in question is fully on their parcel and is fully contained.
Thank you. Mr. Stanley?
Chris, just for a little bit more detail, so that SUP is really largely around the grading required to get that 14%, get the folks up the hill, is that correct?
The SUP is specific to the driveway, the 30%, traversing 30% slopes, constructing a 4.5-foot earthen structure, and the amount of fill that will go on slopes 15% or greater.
All right, thank you. So you wouldn't anticipate much downhill issue, then it's more of a side issue from the road, if anything?
That's getting a little more into engineering realm. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate that. We'll bring it back to the board.
And Mr. Chair, if I can just follow up on Chris's comments too.
Yes, Mr. Lord.
The applicant will be required to follow up with a grading set of plans that will be reviewed by engineering to ensure that there is not any deleterious effects on neighboring properties.
Thank you for that clarification. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and the information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions special use permit number, case number WSUP 22-0036 for Fouquet Land Company, LLC, with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and South Valley's Area Plan, Policy SV 2.16. And those include consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effects on a military installation.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Before I ask for a second, Mr. Large, I'm going to ask for a point of clarification. Ms. Julian brought up the fact about a change under 5C that was part of conditions. Does that need to be stated or clarified?
I think if the motion includes that change, we've noted it over here on condition 5C, that it should reference, sorry, I lost my place here.
I think it was just removing, I believe it said number 2 was
Yeah,
the condition. If we just take that out and say based on conditions.
Right, based on conditions, yes.
I think it should reference 5B.
Yes, She's correct. She referenced 5B, condition C and 5C. So we'll make that reference. And if that motion wants to incorporate that, then.
Mr. Stanley, do you want to just make sure that you clarify that or say of what's discussed?
As part of the motion, condition 2 should now read condition 5B.
Okay, that's acceptable?
And then I have a question on this motion. Did you want to add condition F in there, the South Valley Area Plan, SV 2.15? It's listed on page 11 of the motion.
I believe we did.
I didn't hear that. I just heard effect on military. Did you include that?
I think it was included in the earlier part. Let me check to make sure in the earlier part of the motion.
I didn't hear it. I was going to second it, but I didn't hear that.
I don't believe it. I don't believe he stated it so condition F on.
Okay, are we still talking about SV 2.16?
Yes.
It's at the bottom of the motion, actually, and was read into the record.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes, under motions.
Yeah.
Okay. If that,
what you're referencing is you don't believe he might have stated that?
I didn't hear him state it. Page 10 shows the motion, and then page 11 finishes it up with A, B, C, D, E, F, and F didn't, from what I heard, didn't get read, but maybe I misheard it.
You went through here to military installation. Did you include that?
I did not at that point. It was included here, but
If you will state that, Mr. Stanley.
All right. The South Valley's Area Plan Policy, SV 216, includes SV 216, the approval of all special use permits and administrative permits, and must include a finding that the community character, as described in the character statement, can be adequately conserved through mitigation of any identified potential negative effects. And I believe those are all part of SV 2.16.
All right, good enough. This is Rob. I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, special use permit case number WSUP 22-0038, the Goodwin Personal Storage. I believe we have Senior Planner Waikiki presenting.
Correct. Thank you. Whoops. Go ahead and share my screen 1 second. Okay, thank you. Courtney Waikiki, Senior Planner. The item or case before you is WSUP 22-0038, known as Goodwin Personal Storage. So the request before you is for a special use permit for grading and the construction of a personal storage facility use. The proposed ground disturbance is 1.3 acres with approximately 2,200 cubic yards of cut and 5,300 cubic yards of fill. The personal storage facility is proposed to have 120 individual storage units and an on-site office building. The subject parcel is located currently at 0 Reno Park Boulevard. My understanding is that they will have to get a permanent street address after this, on the west side of North Virginia Street in the Cold Springs area plan. The parcel is 5.35 acres in size. Sorry. There are 3 designated regulatory zones, and it may be difficult to see on the overhead there, but it was included also in the staff report. I tried to delineate using colors which portions of the site belong to each regulatory zone. So the parcel has 24% or 1.28 acres of public semi-public facilities. 42% or 2.25 acres of neighborhood commercial regulatory zone, and 34% or 1.181 acres of general rural. The area outlined there in blue represents the public, semi-public facilities that predominantly follows the Reno Park Boulevard. The area outlined in green represents the general rural, and that's towards the south end of the parcel with the steeper slopes. And the area outlined in red represents neighborhood commercial. The proposed setbacks and uses on each of the pertinent regulatory zones are complied with. Personal storage is prohibited in the general rural and public semi-public facilities regulatory zone. None of the proposed storage units will be located on the general rural or public semi-public facilities portion of the parcel. All structures with the personal storage use will be located solely within the neighborhood commercial regulatory zones. That's the area highlighted there in red. Grading for vehicular access and parking will take place on some portion of all of the regulatory zones. The property would be served by South Reno Park Boulevard, which is accessed by North Virginia Street. South Reno Park Boulevard bisects the western parcel line of the subject parcel. I did request of the applicant to provide additional information on materials and colors for the proposed storage units. This is actually owned by the same owner, Goodwin's General Store, and the applicant indicated that they plan to do similar colors and materials, specifically matching the roof eave of the above picture. Below is also a rendering of the elevations. And we'll talk a little bit about staff's analysis and compliance with the various articles that are applicable. The Article 410 directs the use for the required parking, which would be 10 spaces with one handicapped accessible space. The applicant has provided dedicated striped parking for 3 spaces and 1 handicapped accessible space. In addition, there will be approximately 41 additional unstriped parallel parking spaces in front of the storage units for loading are proposed, which is similar to what you find in these type of storage facilities. Article 412, landscaping, requires that 20% of the developed area be landscaped. The landscaping plan proposes 15,500 square feet of landscaping. Only 13,000 square feet is required based on the developed area of 65,000 square feet. The landscaped areas include buffer areas, streetscapes, parking lot edges, and islands, and various planter beds throughout the parcel. The landscape plan proposes a mixture of deciduous shade trees, flowering, and or deciduous trees, evergreen trees, and shrub plantings to be located along the perimeter that are visible to adjoining uses. As proposed, the landscape plan does meet the requirements of Article 412. Article 436, street design standards. The Washoe County Engineering and Capital Projects Division did review the proposed project and indicated that the existing Reno Park Boulevard, shown, I've highlighted it in blue there, is located within the subject parcel and has an existing easement width of approximately 80 feet, subject to verification, and is currently privately owned and maintained. They further noted that the roadway is severely deteriorated, requiring full reconstruction. Engineering has added conditions of approval to address the needed improvements to Reno Park Boulevard. Article 438, grading. Built out of the proposed development exceeds the major grading thresholds for traversing slopes greater than 30% and fills in excess of 1,000 cubic yards for both cut and fill on slopes greater than 15%. The applicant indicates there will be approximately 1.33 acres of surface disturbance, 2,240 cubic yards of cut, 5,300 cubic yards of fill, and approximately 3,000 cubic yards of imported material. The earthwork summary includes the excavated volume of the entire detention basin that is located at the northernmost tip of the parcel. The site plan generally avoids disturbance of the area designated general rural where the steepest slopes occur. That is shown in red in the overhead slide. There are no requests to vary any of the grading standards. The applicant has demonstrated that there are extenuating circumstances that require grading in slopes over 30%. The location of the personal storage use was designed to avoid the portions of the site with the steepest slopes to the extent possible. However, grading will be necessary along the internal driveway and for portions of the personal storage location. I did provide a little bit of a graphic here where the overlaying the site plan along with the slope to demonstrate that a majority, if not all, of the proposed storage uses are outside of those steepest slopes, as I said, to the extent possible. All grading is proposed to have a maximum of a 3-to-1 slope and will be revegetated with native plant species. 38 properties were notified of the proposed application, and that was within 1,000 feet in order to get the minimum of 30 properties. No comments or phone calls were received either in support or opposition. All applicable agencies reviewed the request and also provided no opposition. Recommended conditions of approval have been incorporated appropriately as an exhibit to the staff report. Staff does believe all required findings can be made, and I have provided a possible motion for your consideration. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff?
Yes, I have a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Julian.
Kathy Julian for the record. Ms. Wyke, the reference to the landscaping is noted in the staff report, but I don't see any. Is there a reason why it isn't in as a condition in the or reference to landscaping is not a condition in the document? I see a reference to the revegetation of the disturbed areas that have been graded, but not the other. And I guess I look for consistency with staff reports in these items.
Thank you, Board Member Julian. I agree that could be, it may actually be better suited to have a condition of approval that specifically references the requirement to comply with what was proposed and presented to you today as part of their landscaping plan. I may defer to Planning Manager Lloyd on whether or not this is common practice. And we should maybe amend the conditions to explicitly state that it is required. However, anything that was presented as part of the staff report is applicable and is enforceable. I do think that could be a better approach maybe for going forward, is that it is memorialized in the conditions of approval. I was unaware if that is maybe a common practice to reference those standards.
And through the chair, if I could just back up what Senior Planner Wyke was mentioning. Yeah, we don't always condition all of the application materials. There is a standard condition that the plans that are approved must be in compliance with the complete application that is submitted. And I believe that's one of the first conditions in the list of conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Are there any more questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stanley.
Planner White, could you speak to the status of the well, commercial versus private, and the status currently for that application?
So I was actually looking at that specific section. We did have the water rights manager review the application, and they indicated that water service will be required from either Great Basin Water Company or under an active water right for commercial / quasi municipal purposes. So essentially, the water rights manager is assuring that whatever water rights that are needed or necessary will be required. And from what their comment letter states, it looks like there's a couple of options afforded to them. The first being to obtain them from the Great Basin Water Company. As far as to the existing well, I'm not sure if I understand what the question is there, if that's something I would be able to answer. Maybe you could clarify for me.
Yeah, it seemed like the water group was asking for either, as you say, commercial or hook up to the existing systems that are out there. And there was concern among some of the comments about water table and so forth. So I was asking whether or not an application had already been filed for commercial, or if in fact the plan is to go ahead and use the existing water services that are available in that area without a well.
That would be, I don't know that I could speak to what they will plan to do, other than it comes across as if the kind of path of least resistance is to obtain water service from the Great Basin Water Company. And if that is not an option, then they have to acquire adequate water rights from the Cold Springs Valley Hydrographic Basin. As well, let's see, a condition of approval will require the applicant to provide proof of water service or an active water right approved by the Nevada State Engineer prior to grading or construction. So there is a condition of approval that will require that those water rights are obtained prior to, any work being done. However, until that time, I wouldn't be able to say exactly what way they will be meeting that condition, only that they will be required to meet that condition.
Okay, and I'm going to just put a fine point on that if you don't mind. So at this point, the status is nothing has been applied for either way because it's still open.
I'm not sure. Hopefully, I believe it's Eric LaRue, maybe in the audience there, who might be able to speak to that, whether or not they have started the process to obtain those water rights.
All right.
I'm unaware.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wyke, I do have one question for you. Within the report on page 22, Exhibit B, it is a traffic statement, and it says this development is proposed to have 87 individual storage units, and yet earlier we heard there's supposed to be 120. Can you clarify that for me, or what document should we be looking at?
My understanding is that there is 120 storage units. Again, I may ask that if the applicant is in the room to clarify that, but in looking at the site plan, it does indicate 120 storage units.
Thank you. I'll hold that for the applicant then. Thank you. Are there any more questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is the applicant present?
Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric LaRue. I'm with Robinson Engineering, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Let me jump right in. As for the discrepancy between 87 and 120 units, that is an earlier document that we submitted where we had 87 units, but in fact, the number of units we're looking to put into this space is 120, so 120 should be the number. And with regard to whether there's been an application yet for the water, I'm not aware that that's been done yet. So I believe we will be looking to the third-party source, but I don't think we've started that process yet.
Mr. LaRue, the question I have then is this document for a traffic impact at 80, was it? 87, and it's actually 120. Does that mean that you need to go back and have that recalculated then to get a more accurate number of?
If I may jump in on that very
Thank you,
quickly.
Mr. Lloyd.
From the county's perspective, because the number of trips are going to be well below the threshold needed for a traffic analysis, we would not require an additional traffic study.
Mr. Lloyd, do you know what that number is, where it changes?
Yeah, it's essentially 80 peak hour trips. This is, at 87, they're identifying about 6 trips per day. So if you were to essentially even double that at 12 trips per day, that would be well under the 80 peak hour trips required.
So, thank you, I appreciate it. So it's your opinion then that a further traffic study probably would not be warranted?
That is correct.
Thank you, I can accept that. Are there any other questions for this gentleman?
If you don't mind, I would like to pursue the question on groundwater versus the system water. Could you speak to that issue with a bit more clarity then for us? You mentioned you weren't certain that anything had been filed, but what's the inclination of the project to, is it to use a commercial well, or is it to hook into the existing water services system?
It's to get water from a third party. That's my understanding. So we won't be using the existing well there.
Okay, so likely not a well, likely using the existing services.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Lou, run a quick question. What's the approximate square footage of these units that you're going to be putting in?
I believe most are 10 by 20, I think is the number. Standard size for this type of project.
But they will change. There will be some a little larger and some smaller. Or
It's
all
possible
gonna
there
be
may be some
uniform?
larger ones, but that'll be it. There won't be that'll be the minority of them.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go over to staff and ask staff if there's any public comment on this item.
There is no public comment in chambers. However, I do have a hand raised via Zoom. Philip, if you could please state your first and last name for the record.
Philip Prive. I am the owner directly south, the 21-acre parcel.
Go ahead, the floor is yours.
I have no problem with this. I look at it as a improvement to fire safety.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you wish to add?
No, I at one time was going to do storage on my property, but I decided at the time that I was unsure if that's what I wanted to build on.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments?
And there are no further hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Christensen.
And I think I should direct this to Mr. Lloyd principally. This is the fourth permit or grading permit or special use permit that we've addressed this morning or this afternoon. Without, with exception of this last gentleman who spoke to us, I'm not convinced that our CAB functions are working right, or the mailings are going out, or what. We're not getting any real feedback, and it seemed to drop off from the time that I earlier joined the board some time ago. Can you explain for this board again what exactly the CAB mission is now as compared to what it was originally?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you, board member Christensen.
Thank you.
The role of the citizen advisory boards have changed drastically. since many of you have even been on the board. Originally, the citizen advisory boards were reviewing almost exclusively development projects, and now they are no longer. The board, the CABs are looking at almost every other community element other than development projects. We've created a new process to engage the public through a neighborhood meeting where we mirror essentially the same noticing requirements that we use for these public hearings. We send those out and we ask that the applicants host a neighborhood meeting specific to each development project. And that's what's taken place on not all of these projects, but most of them. Some of the smaller scale, for example, some of the smaller scale administrative review requests do not involve neighborhood meetings, so there is not that public engagement for those. But the bigger ones, like this one, any commercial project, any tentative subdivision map, most of the special use permits do involve a neighborhood meeting. And you find, depending on the project itself, some of them we do get a good deal of engagement and participation and feedback. Some of the smaller scale projects, such as this, we don't get a lot of feedback on those projects. We also have created a web page. It's our neighborhood meeting hub site that lists all of the upcoming neighborhood meetings. And included is a survey that's conducted for each of those neighborhood meeting projects. And we don't get a whole lot of feedback in the surveys, but from time to time we do. But it's someplace that folks can go to look at all of the projects that are coming forward, all the big projects that are coming forward. We also require that these neighborhood meetings take place prior to submittal of an application, which is also a big departure, big change from the previous CAB prior to this, the items would go to the CABs, but after application submittal. It also creates an opportunity for applicants to build into their applications the comments and the concerns that are raised before an application is submitted. I hope that answers your question, but in a nutshell, that's our new process.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lloyd. I think that answered my question. What I'm searching for here is more input from the public, because I would surely hate to approve this project, for example, or recommend for approval, and find out that someone was excluded from that review process. So let's chalk it up as a memo kind of a thing. Personally, I'm satisfied, but I really, really go on the record as supporting community involvement in all of our projects. Anything that we hear, so yeah, some of them are relatively small, but I'll just express that. You satisfied my question, but I'm still concerned that we're not getting a lot of feedback from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Is there any further discussion?
Kathy Julian, for the record.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that point just raised. I didn't see, and perhaps it's because it's here, but I didn't see it, a reference to a neighborhood meeting for this project. And it would be helpful if we had on, I guess, Exhibit C and on page 28 here, if we had an actual paragraph that said whether or not a neighborhood meeting was held, and if so, how many people attended, and if there was a neighborhood meeting held, then a brief summary of what went on in that neighborhood meeting, or perhaps a link for the board to the recording of the meeting, much as was done with the next project that I think we'll look at, the larger apartment development. And I spent this afternoon listening to that neighborhood meeting. But I think that would help us get more comfortable with the fact that there is some public involvement here if we know which ones do have neighborhood meetings and we have some summary of that in the actual staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd, maybe as a point of clarification, if in fact there is a staff meeting, and if there is especially any public comment that comes in to your department, that is forwarded to us and is part of the documentation.
Mr. Lloyd, or I don't know if maybe I may be able to respond directly in regard to this application.
Please go ahead.
Okay, Courtney Wyke, Senior Planner for the record. We did receive a neighborhood meeting summary and it is included, let me check here 1 second, as Exhibit E. The meeting took place on November 28th of last year. I believe that Mr. Robinson did use the template provided by the county, which lays out summarizing public concerns, changes made to the proposal, and any additional comments. So that was included as Exhibit E. I did just check, and this was perhaps an oversight on my part with our template. Maybe I know going forward, the templates for permits that require neighborhood meetings, we do have that as a subsection of the staff report. And that was an oversight on my part. It does not appear that the staff report included reference to the Exhibit E. However, it was included as an exhibit, but going forward, we'll make sure that all the staff reports do have that language or template there as a trigger to the planner to make sure we summarize in the staff report what took place at that neighborhood meeting. And then, Mr. Lloyd, you're welcome to chime in if you want to add anything in addition to what the question was posed to staff.
Right, and I would agree. I believe that was an oversight. Typically, we give a summary of the neighborhood meeting in the staff report. I know that we have the memo, the Exhibit E at the end of this of your packet, which it discusses all of the concerns that were raised by the members that were present. But that is that is part of the staff report template to include a summary.
Okay, I would like to stop this right here because we've kind of gotten off base. I think we can save that for requests from staff when we get to that. Right now, we're hearing this. So if we can keep our questions directly related to the incident, or I should say the issue that is in front of us and the application. So is there any more questions, or I should say, is there any more discussion on this matter?
Just, Mr. Chair, just for clarification here on Exhibit E, everyone's speaking about the meeting.
I don't know what is the question that you're asking me? I'm not following.
If I'm reading this correctly on Exhibit E, there were two non-related to the project attendees, and I was just wondering if that was what the attendance for the meeting, if that's correct, if that's the correct number. It seems to show two attendees. Is that correct? Do we know?
Planner Wyke, can you clarify that? I mean, are you referencing under additional comments of neither property owners, or I don't see where you're coming up with.
I'm getting there. It says if you do the math or read the numbers, it looks like there were 6 total attendees, 4 of which were associated with the project, if I'm reading it correctly. So there were 2 neighborhood attendees. Is that correct?
Courtney Wyke for the record. Mr. LaRue, if you have, maybe you could provide some additional insight. I'm looking at the same document that you are, and I don't see a specific question on how many attendees were at the neighborhood meeting, other than a reference that 4 members of the Goodwin family attended. Eric, would you be able to provide a little bit more insight into the attendance?
Yes, absolutely. Eric LaRue again for the record. In addition to the representatives of the Goodwin family there were 2 neighbors there, including Philip, who called in today, and another adjoining neighbor, and neither one had any opposition. They didn't express any opposition that evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will make the motion. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received in the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 22-0038 for Martin Goodwin, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code, Section 110.810.30, that being consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effects on a military operation. Is there a second?
Mr. Rob, I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We are going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will hear next item.
Recording stopped.
Okay. Okay.
See?
Oh, yeah.
Recording in progress.
We'll go ahead and bring this meeting back to order. The next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 23-0001 and administrative permit case number WADMIN 22-0029 Chocolate Drive. Before we hear from staff, I just want to advise the board that I had received an email from a representative of the developer that had offered up to speak with me if I had any questions about the project. I did respond back to him, thanking him for the email, and basically just advised him that I thought it was better that we do this in a public setting, to which he was agreeable to. So as a disclosure, I just wanted to make sure that that got out there. But I do appreciate the opportunity that they have presented me with and the direction that we decided to go. With that being said, we'll go ahead and hear from planner.
Good afternoon, Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. We're looking at WADMIN 22-0029 and WSUP 23-1. This is for Chocolate Drive. Chocolate Drive it's located off Chocolate Drive and it extends from West 2nd Avenue to West 5th Avenue. It's a quite long and linear site adjacent to Red Hill Open Space and within the Sun Valley Area Plan. It's also located within the Sun Valley Suburban Character Management Area. The proposal as presented contains two parcels, APNs 502-25009, which is the significantly larger parcel, and 502-25010, which is a smaller sliver of the. The administrative permit request is for a proposed multifamily residential complex, apartment complex. It contains a total of 240 total units. There's 20 buildings proposed. Those buildings are intended to be 2 stories. As part of the proposal will be, the applicant is proposing for a clubhouse, a swimming pool, covered and garage parking spaces, a mail kiosk, playground, and additional recreational amenities. Additionally, as part of the administrative request, the applicant is proposing to construct a trailhead. As part of that trailhead, parts of it will be dedicated to Washoe County. With the special use permit, this project is going to require considerable grading, and the special use permit is specific to the major grading request. The major grading will consist of 156,688 cubic yards of cut, 43,512 cubic yards of fill, with 113,175 cubic yards of export. The proposed disturbance area is roughly 25 acres. As part of this special use permit, the applicant is requesting to vary 4 standards. 3 are within grading, 1 is in with landscaping. Those requested modifications are 41260K4, which requires turf areas to be a minimum of 50% of required landscaping. 43845C, which requires that finished grading shall not vary from natural slope by more than 10 feet. Again, that's a relatively common request for modified standards. And then 43860A and 43860B, which are grading setbacks for toe and top of cut slope and fill slope. So there's a significant history with this proposed project. So in 2015, the Sun Valley Area Plan was modified to allow for medium density urban to be allowed within the suburban character management area. This parcel being in the suburban character management area, the applicants in 2022 came forward with a request to change what was the existing zoning of medium density suburban to medium density urban and open space, and to also change the master plan designation from suburban residential to urban residential and open space. The MPA RZA, the Master Plan Amendment and Regulatory Zone Amendment, was heard by the Planning Commission in April of 2022, and it was denied. The applicants appealed this decision to the Board of County Commissioners, which was heard on June 28th, 2022. The Board of County Commissioners did approve this request 4-1. From there, these MPA RZAs are required to go through regional conformance review. So in August of 2022, on August 25th, the Regional Planning Commission reviewed this request and unanimously approved the request. And then what happened afterwards is this request then went to the Regional Governing Board. And the Regional Governing Board, the intent of that hearing was to amend the land designation from what the existing Tier 3 that was already on the property to Tier 2. And that took place on October 13th, 2022. That decision was approved unanimously. So with the grading, going back to the grading, there are some significant retaining walls that are associated with this project. I provided a section that shows the 3 proposed retaining walls, the clubhouse, as well as the drive areas. These proposed retaining walls are a maximum height of 10 feet. The intent of these retaining walls is to mitigate any scarring of the hillside and try and condense the grading down to the actual development as a whole. With these stacked retaining walls, the majority of those stacked retaining walls will actually be on the west end of the proposed project, and they will contain benches. The benches, as per code, is required to be landscaped. I've also provided a cut-fill slope map. The red, as you can see, is for cut. However, there are some darker areas. Unfortunately, it doesn't show up as great on this image, but towards the clubhouse in the center of the picture, right before the development starts moving to the right, that's where the majority of the cut slope is going to take place at that 29.48 feet. The maximum fill slope is towards the buildings at the bottom between the roadway and the rest of the development. The max fill slope is going to be roughly 15.86 feet. Due to the topography, and as you can see with this cut fill slope, that is why the applicants did request to modify 43845C, and staff was supportive of that request. So I provided some elevations. This is just one of the 3 building types that the applicant has proposed. The other elevations can be found within your staff report. It should be noted that the Sun Valley Area Plan and the Sun Valley modifiers within the Washington County Development Code both limit the max height to 2 stories. The applicant is proposing 2-story buildings as part of this development. The max height of the tallest building, I believe, is 32 feet. Before you is also elevations of the proposed clubhouse, as well as some of the concepts for the garages. We have a 4-bay and an 8-bay. So one of the things that came about within the Planning Commission hearings for the MPA RZA was the proximity to altered andesite buckwheat. It's not an endangered species, but it is a state protected species, and there are native soils found on the property. However, there are populations of this plant found adjacent on the Red Hill open space. This map shows where the locations currently are, the limits. However, there is currently no altered andesite buckwheat found on site. And as is proposed currently, the development will not impact any existing altered andesite buckwheat populations. So I want to talk about landscaping. This is an overall concept of the total site plan. Towards the bottom, you'll see those yellowish looking images areas. Those are significant detention basins. So as this is on the bottom of a hill, the intent is to capture as much stormwater and retain it on site as possible. Those are code requirements to retain all that on site. With the landscaping, they're proposing 3,270 shrubs as well as 545 trees. This is a requirement of code. The landscaping plan shows that they do meet this requirement. However, with the request for a modification with turf, they're requesting down to 21% of the total site being turf grass at 31,989 square feet. Staff does support this due to our environment. We're a high desert climate. We do require that turf still be required as part of the common open space elements associated with the specific residence. So with the common open space, section 432 requires a minimum of 200 square feet of common open space per dwelling for developments of 12 units or more. With 240 units proposed, they're required to have 48,000 square foot of common open space. Now that all does not have to be grass, but that is a requirement to have large open grass areas as part of it. With all the common open space elements that were provided as part of the proposed development, they are proposing 50,258 square feet of common open space. These elements can include courtyards, large lawn areas, turf, playgrounds, tennis courts, basketball courts, swimming pools, or similar outdoor recreation facilities. There was a traffic study that was prepared by Kimley Horn. The traffic study did identify the following peak trips as at full build out. What is currently anticipated is 96 a.m. peak hour trips and 122 p.m. peak hour trips. This application was sent to RTC and NDOT for review. No conditions or additional comments were received. Parking is always an important topic when it comes to these types of developments. With this development, there's 468 parking spaces that are required. Applicant is proposing 470. Of the amount of parking that is required, our code does require each dwelling have a covered parking space. With 240 units, With 240 covered units, 240 units, there are 240 covered parking spaces that are required. They are proposing 204 covered parking spaces with 36 garages, thus meeting that requirement. Additionally, they're proposing 28 accessible parking spaces with an additional, with 18 of those being van accessible. So as part of this development, one of the benefits of it is that Chocolate Drive is intended to be paved. And they are intending to put sidewalks on the west side of Chocolate Drive. This is where the modification request for the toe of slope and top of slope setbacks comes into play. Without the modification request being granted, it's going to either increase grading significantly to allow for this roadway to be developed, or the roadway would not be able to be developed at all. Therefore, staff is in support of the requested modification. I've also provided a proposed cross-section of Chocolate Drive, showing you what the anticipated roadway will look like. Additionally, as part of this development, we're looking at seeing a Washoe County trailhead as part of the proposal. As submitted, there are 8 parking spaces at the within this trailhead. The trailhead is located at the northern end of this project site and will allow direct access to Red Hill open space. This trailhead specifically encompasses roughly 4.87 acres, and the intention stated by the developer is to dedicate it to Washoe County. You all should have gotten an email earlier today about potentially amended motion and an amended condition. Before you on this slide is the proposed amended condition. Staff would like to see the following condition placed under planning's direct conditions, which states that the proposed trailhead shall be completed per the approved construction improvement drawings prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy of the first multifamily building to the satisfaction of the Community Services Department Director of Operations. The applicants did hold a neighborhood meeting on October 19th, 2022. It was held from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The applicant stated that there were 14 signatures within the document that was provided to staff. However, they noted that there was a total of 18 neighbors in attendance. There were also 4 comment cards submitted as part of that packet, and the concerns from the public related to traffic, water, stormwater, school impacts, noise, light pollution, flooding, as well as the Chocolate Drive paving. Staff is recommending approval with conditions of both the special use permit as well as the administrative permit. The motions can be found on page 32 and 33 of the staff report. As mentioned, it was asked that you receive an amended copy of those directly to you. I also want to mention that we do have additional staff presenters to assist with this project. One is the Director of Engineering and Capital Projects, Dwayne Smith, who has additional information related to Chocolate Drive's placement as well as the construction process. Additionally, we have Parks Planner Faye Marie Picard, who is able to provide any additional information related to the altered andesite buckwheat, the proposed trailhead, as well as any questions potentially from the board in relation to the Washoe Story Conservation District's comments. Dwayne?
Good afternoon. For the record, Dwayne Smith, Director of Engineering and Capital Projects. While I don't have a presentation, I thought it would be appropriate just to share a few comments And first want to acknowledge Chris's presentation. Thank you. I think he provided a lot of the information, so I'll try not to duplicate a lot of that. But I just wanted to provide a little additional information as you consider the variance request for this project before you today, these 4 variance requests. And as Chris identified, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more specifically about Chocolate Drive. Currently, Chocolate Drive is a series of access easements. It's not paved. It's basically a dirt road, and it's had some very minor improvements over the years. Since I've been with Washoe County and been in the role that I am, I've received numerous phone calls from residents in the area, concerns, asking when we were going to pave Chocolate Drive, when we were going to provide the kind of the access for emergency service providers that can be relied upon, when waste management would be able to get in there and get the trash cans during certain times of the year. This project is in front of us now. They are conditioned to build a roadway that meets Washoe County requirements, meets the fire district requirements for emergency access as well. And of course, our requirements include pedestrian improvements and amenities. So I think you saw with Chris's cross-section, we've identified the requirement, not an option, but a requirement for sidewalks and also drainage improvements. Let's not forget that a roadway section is not just the paved surface, but it includes curb and gutter, and in this case, sidewalks. The issue at hand with a paved roadway and a series of access easements is a little bit unique for us. Normally, development is obligated to go out and acquire all the required right-of-way for the development of those roadways, those trails, those amenities that are ultimately going to be offered for dedication to Washoe County for ownership. And of course, with ownership goes responsibility for maintenance, repair, replacement, snow plowing, those types of things. But because Chocolate Drive is a series of access easements, and these easements are owned by Washoe County residents, we stepped in to say we would like to be kind of the tip of the spear and reach out to those property owners that live along Chocolate Drive. We wanted to let them know about this project. I think a lot of them have already come to some of those public meetings that you heard Chris mentioning, but also to assure them that Washoe County is not going to take their properties through some type of condemnation action or some type of effort that they wouldn't agree to. So we sent out letters inviting the community that abuts Chocolate Drive, those property owners that own the underlying properties where those access easements exist. We invited them to come and talk with us. We said, we will come out and talk with you. We will talk on the telephone if you want to have a public meeting, you want to have one-on-one meetings, whatever that is. We will do that. Because what we really believe here is there's an opportunity to locate the new Chocolate Drive on that access easement. Now, I want to be real clear, if it doesn't end up going that direction, if any one of the property owners says that they don't want Washoe County to have a roadway on that access easement, because it does require an irrevocable offer of dedication of that easement. So that easement then converts from that privately owned property to Washoe County right-of-way. It requires that. But if anybody says no, what the developer's engineers have done is provided us a design that shows that a future Washoe County roadway can exist solely on their property. So we're not talking about will a roadway work or not. We're talking about where that roadway is going to be located. Is it going to be located on currently private property that has access easements that were dedicated for the benefit of the property owners and the other community members to travel along that access easement? Or is it going to be located on the Chocolate Drive property? And that's where one of the 2 variance requests come in. So you've got your 4 variance requests that you're considering today as part of your action. And 2 of those variance requests are for that grading. So that's so that at the end of the day, if you approve the variance requests, that roadway can be constructed and meet Washoe County requirements, can be offered to Washoe County for dedication, can be accepted by Washoe County, and can be part of our road network and in our inventory. That means fixing potholes. That means plowing snow. That means the emergency service providers can get in RIMSA in a much better, quicker fashion. If you can't tell, I'm excited about this because this, as I said before, I've had a lot of calls with folks over the years. I have a feeling a few of them are sitting in the audience. And so we see this as an opportunity, not just for the development, but for the adjacent and associated property owners. So I just wanted to mention to you that the solution exists, and that's what the applicant's engineers have demonstrated to us, that a successful roadway meeting Washoe County requirements can be built, offered up for dedication, and accepted by Washoe County. If the residents choose, and we're in the process of working with them right now, we've heard back from, and don't quote me on these numbers, but I think I'm pretty right about this. 7 of the 16 have already said, yes, we get it. That property has always been a access easement. It's always been a problem. So we get what you're trying to allow this developer to do. Remember, Washoe County's not paying for this. The developer's paying for this. 2 of the property owners have said no. But I really believe that there's an opportunity to explain, because I think that there's also some questions in there. So we're going to be reaching out to them on a one-on-one basis to have those conversations if they want to have those conversations with us. Ultimately, I think that the variance requests in front of you for your consideration today will allow for this roadway to be built on the Chocolate Drive property. But as I said before, if it doesn't end up being built there and it's built over on the access easement, that's less grading, less of those types of things. But under either one of those circumstances, stormwater is dealt with. There is no roadway without stormwater considerations. Drainage is part of that solution. Has to be, not an option. Driveways to those property owners and to the roadways, because if you look at the aerial map, you'll see that there's a couple of roadways. They're access easements that go in and service several properties with a bulb at the end of those. Those driveway accesses will be perpetuated with that new Chocolate Drive. So it's not going to be, I don't want anybody to think that there's just going to be a roadway. There's not going to be any curb cuts or returns, that there's not going to be any culvert pipes, that there's not going to be any driveway extensions, so that it can meet up with those existing driveways and with those existing roadways. That would not occur. We are going to make sure that that is done. And I have to be honest with you, the developer had already put all that onto the preliminary designs before we even asked. So that's not an issue. The roadway will be paved, of course, with asphaltic concrete. It will meet our Washoe County standards. So I just really felt like that there's been enough maybe confusion and some questions that might come up. So I thought I'd provide you just a little bit of context. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I'm obviously here if you have any further questions. Thanks.
Chris, is there anyone else on behalf of your presentation that needs to address the board, or is it just the 2 of you?
That currently concludes staff who will be presenting at this time. However, as mentioned, we do have Faye Marie, our parks planner, if any questions do arise related to the trailhead or Washoe Story Conservation District comments.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So while we have you up here, are there any questions for staff or for Mr. Smith that needs to be addressed?
This is Rob. Chris, I can't find the traffic study. What page did you put that on? Do you remember?
So the traffic study is, I don't know if it would have been a part of the direct project as a whole. It was available online the entire time it was part of that process. Give me just a second to see if I can find the exact exhibit if it is.
There is an item on page 23 that addresses traffic. I don't know if that will suffice.
Looking back through this, it was not part of the exhibits. It was part of the overall public process. It was publicly available on our website throughout the entire process.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, within that traffic, it does say approximately 96 AM peak hour trips and approximately 122 PM peak hour trips to the surrounding road network. And then it goes on from there, so.
Yeah, it just seems a little low compared to how many units they're building, but that's just my personal opinion. All right, thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. Stanley?
Yes, I have one. Chris, and maybe this is a question for the applicant. There was some question about impact on schools was one of the things that came up in that neighborhood conversation, I think. And I noticed kind of, I don't want to say glaringly, but missing was a response from the Washoe, according to the matrix there, missing was a response from the Washoe County School District, unless I missed something there.
You did not miss anything. This was sent to Washoe County School District. We did not receive any comments back related to this project. I'm going to hand that over to the applicants because I do believe they might have.
You know, if I may, and this might be applicant as well, do we have any sense of the impact on the schools? In other words, what's the demographic of the folks, the intended demographic of the folks who, you know, reside there? And how many of those might be school-aged children and so forth?
So typically that would be handled by the school district in their response. They provide that sort of matrix and analysis.
Sure.
Again, because I didn't receive anything specifically from them. I don't have that information.
Right.
Again, I do believe that the applicants will have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for staff before we move on to the applicant
Yes.
representative?
Yes, Kathy Julian for the record.
Just one moment. please. Go ahead.
Yes, and this is for Chris. There's a reference to in the public meeting, there were assurances given to the public that there would be somehow ATV access. But when I look at the document, there are conditions evidently put in by the open space people that there would be barriers to off-road vehicles. Can you discuss that dynamic and whether that has been communicated to the public and how? Thank you.
Sure. So Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. I don't know if that information has been addressed to the public. However, I do have Faye Marie here who can speak to the requirements for prohibiting off-road vehicles.
For the record, Faye Marie Picard, Park Planner for Washoe County. In terms of the off-road vehicles for the Red Hill open space, it's deed restricted to ensure that off-road vehicles do not go onto this property. So one of the incentives that we have for this project and this development is helping to reduce the ability to have off-road vehicles on the Red Hill open space itself. So one of the asks that we had within our conditions is not only for this development to act as a physical barrier to the Red Hill open space for off-road vehicles, but also for 3 access gates to be blocked and keyed in order to keep off-road vehicles from entering into this space itself.
Okay, thank you. And a second query on the open space, and perhaps it's for you as well. As I understand, the developers would very much like to give that open space to Red Hill Open Space, but Red Hill has raised some concerns about overall maintenance down the road. Where does that stand now?
Correct. So within our recommendations and condition from our Parks and Open Space, currently the Parks Program does not want to accept additional open space immediately adjacent to new development. And in this site particular, it's because of the steep hillsides, a lot of the recommendations for us to keep up with fire and fuel reductions, as well as just trying to keep up with general open space would be a burden on our maintenance itself. So it's not a benefit for us to take on this additional land other than our open space that's adjacent to this property. However, there is the open space dedication for the trailhead itself with the 8 parking spots and the ability to have accessibility to our Red Hill open space, which is also part of our master plan from 2012 for the Red Hill. So this plan does support keeping accessibility to our trailheads and open space, as well as the future Sun Valley Rim Trail itself.
Okay, thank you. And I take it the open space that the developer has identified would remain undeveloped and would simply be there until somebody perhaps wants to take it in the future. Is that your understanding?
As far as towards the trailhead itself or just the open space area?
The open space in general.
I'd have to rely on the consultant themselves to answer that, but I don't believe there's any indication for that to be developed in the future.
Okay, thank you.
And Chris can also answer that question as well.
So within the, Chris Brunswick, Washoe County Planning. So within the actual open space that follows the perimeter of the entire parcel, that's zoned open space. That's also master plan designated open space. So there's no development that could ever take place on there to begin with. So if there's any sort of dedication in the future, the only way it could go is to Washoe County, which at this time, that's not the way Washoe County is trending.
Thank you. I have a quick question going back to the trailhead, if someone can answer that for me. I was out there at a site inspection today, and I noticed that on 5th Street, as you get to the top, that's a very large opening at 5th and Chocolate. It looks like that's where everybody goes into the open space area. If we block that off and you can't get your ATVs or motorcycles up there, are we creating a problem by just shoving them somewhere else in which they'll find access?
So Faye may be a better person to discuss this option. However, my understanding is there are going to be multiple gates across the entirety of Chocolate Drive, not just up at the West 5th Avenue where the proposed trailhead is, in an effort to try and restrict that off-road vehicle access. Faye, do you want to provide additional?
For the record, Faye Marie Picard, Park Planner. Just in general, again, for the off-road vehicles, the open space, Red Hill open space adjacent to this property is restricted to not have off-road vehicles in that area. So any motorized vehicles should not be allowed on that property to begin with. But the trailhead itself near the West 5th Avenue intersection of Chocolate Drive does serve as a public trailhead and public area for people to access the trails themselves on Red Hill open space. So that'll be a dedicated space in order to get to the Red Hill open space itself. So that's not restricting the ability for anyone to get there. It's actually incentivizing to have a parking area and to have a dedicated trailhead in the area itself. The gates that we're asking for are on the western portion of the property, which is across open space access easements for the water tank and other easement areas. But we want to make sure that that's restricted to just proper use of those easements in order to get to the utilities and not for the public to access that with their motorized vehicles.
So as a point of clarification, if I was an off-road enthusiast and I brought a vehicle or a motorcycle up there from 5th Street and Chocolate, would I be able to get up and access the hills from there?
We would be asking for barriers within that area for the public trailhead, so that would be restricted.
Okay, and so then that would then displace these individuals that they would have to go somewhere else to
find access?
For off-road vehicles, they would be moved to a more appropriate area that allows off-road vehicles versus the Red Hill open space, which is deed restricted to not have off-road vehicles in that area already.
Are there dedicated areas in that area now for off-road access?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I'm your newest park planner from December, so in the past 3 months of me organizing information, I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but I can get you that information. And I don't know if Chris can help answer that question in addition.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more questions
Yes.
for staff?
Yes, Kathy Jillian for the record. Sadly, I do. On schools, where is the nearest school? How far from the location? And the sidewalks, what is the path that will take the kids to the school? And third question would be, in the public meeting, some people complained that there would be problem with traffic going from Chocolate Drive to Sun Valley Boulevard through their unpaved access roads. Can you address how that is being addressed? Thank you.
Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. So the nearest school is directly to the south of this project, this subject site, and that is Lois Allen Elementary School. The sidewalks, as are proposed, will be on the west end of Chocolate Drive, and if constructed, it will extend from West 2nd Avenue to West 5th Avenue. The school, Lois Allen Elementary, is directly off of West 2nd. As far as your second question, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I don't know if Dwayne has any answers related to that. The intent of Chocolate Drive as a whole is to try and bring as much traffic onto that road to primarily offload them onto West 5th and West 2nd.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions for staff on this?
Chris, this is Rob. For a point of clarification, is it your understanding that the property behind this development on Red Hill is closed to motorized vehicles as it stands today?
Chris Browns of Washoe County Planning. Based off of questions to our park planner, no, it is not.
It is not. Okay. The reason I ask is I've heard that they don't want vehicles up in that area, ATVs. There's a shooting range on the other side of the hill, and there's some safety concerns with the college. That's why I asked. Okay. I had heard that it was closed. So, thank you.
Okay, any more additional questions for staff? Thank you. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that. And is the representative present and wish to speak on this?
Good afternoon, Brent Nassett with Kimley Horn here on behalf of the applicant Pedcore Development. All right. Okay, so I'll try also not to be duplicative of the information presented today. We do appreciate staff with all the information that they presented. This project, we've kind of reviewed the location of this, that this is adjacent to the Red Hill open space. There is 2 parcels there today, and it's centered around Chocolate Drive. It is a long linear parcel along this west edge. Here is a graphic. This might help with your question on the location of the nearest school. So Lois Allen's right to the south there. It's in that red box. There will be, and we'll get into it a little bit here, Chocolate Drive will have a sidewalk along the west edge, and that will provide some connectivity for the development and the area to allow pedestrians to traverse this area. We've talked a little bit about the open space and the trail system to the west, and I'll get into the trailhead later. And then I guess one more note, Sun Valley Boulevard. So there is some questions about where Sun Valley Boulevard is at relation to the project. So Second Avenue, which is the location on the furthest south of the development, is a paved road. This will be connecting to that, and then Chocolate Drive is to the north. There is a section of road that we are looking at to pave portions of Fifth Avenue. But Second Avenue in the south will be the main paved road that this will connect to, along with Chocolate Drive. The staff went into some of the planning that went into this with the rezoning. So this rezoning went through master plan and regulatory zone amendment, and that was approved on June 28th. And then there was a conformance review done on August 31st, 2022. And so this project is in conformance with that master plan and the Sun Valley area plan, and it is zoned appropriate for the development. The one note I'll make is the current zoning is 21 units per acre. The development itself right now is obviously proposing much less than that, 21 acres per development over that 40 acres that it could develop. Here's some pictures of the existing development. This is really around Chocolate Drive that we've talked a lot today. It's an unpaved road and a minimally maintained road that this project will immediately improve. So the project request today, so we've already went through the zoning request before. The project request today is this administrative permit to allow for the residential component, and then a special use permit for the major grading. If you've been out there, there is some terrain challenges, as most land that's available in Reno has, or in the Reno metro area in Washoe County. And so this one's not unique in that nature. It does have some terrain that we're working with. So the proposed project, here's some more renderings. There is 240 units. Maximum height 32 feet. So in your staff application packet, one of the things that we looked at was view sheds, and we were asked to review what this view shed would look like. These are 2-story multifamily residential structures. They're not 4-story, 5-story. They're 2-story capped at 32 feet. So those view sheds that are in your packet kind of display what you would see as you're coming away from the development and you look back towards the open space, and you'll see the limited amount that you can actually see of this project from those vantage points. There is going to be a considerable amount of site landscaping around this project to kind of dress up the impervious areas, the parking, everything else around it. And again, some of those primary entrances we already talked about a little bit with Second Street. So the proposed project, I'll kind of get into a little bit on a rendered plan here, kind of give you a visual of the project a little bit more, but it does have several amenities in and around the project itself. We'll center in around the trail access. I think that's an important amenity on the north side of the project. And then there is common open space, in and around the project. It does meet the parking requirements that the county has asked us to meet. 468 spaces were required. We're providing 470 spaces. Okay, so here's the rendered plan. So again, long linear parcel, as you can tell, not very much depth. It's a unique project in that we have almost essentially duplicative infrastructure in terms of there is an interior circulation road where parking will be, and that's how residents will enter and come into their development and park in their locations and in their garages to access their residence. And then there's a completely separate public road, which is Chocolate Drive. So the main traffic, when the circulation, people, maneuvering their vehicles to get in and out of their residences is going to happen within the development. It will not happen within Chocolate Drive. Chocolate Drive is intended to be a major improvement for emergency access. It's going to be better for waste management. It's going to, in general, be better for the public as well. It will be maintained by the county, so it'll be cleared in times like we have right now when there's a considerable amount of snow. And so access will be maintained. And then on site, this is kind of a separate deal. So that's going to be maintained by this development, and they'll have full-time management staff on hand. So you can tell there's a couple different amenities on the project, and that's intended to have the residents have things within their development that they can go to. There's a pool, there's a clubhouse, there's some open space, there's a playground, there's sidewalks throughout it. It's ADA compliant, to the code that we have to meet. And then Chocolate Drive is, to the east, and that also has sidewalks, and that will have a paved road as well. There's a considerable amount of stormwater management, and I'll kind of get into a little bit of an exhibit about how, one of the things that we heard about during the neighborhood meeting was flood control and some of the, unmitigated runoff that comes down from the hillside. So, that comes into this neighborhood, and this neighborhood development's going to handle that and then, convey it elsewhere. Landscaping shown here, we did ask for reduction in turf, trying to consider the unique, not unique, it's Northern Nevada, it's a high desert, so we're trying to be considerate of water, but there will be a considerable amount of landscaping to include any retaining walls, as noted by staff. On the south side of the project is the trailhead. And so this has been a topic of conversation for us, working with Washoe County, the Parks Department and staff. And so that trailhead is part of this project, and it's on the south side of this project, and there is access to this, and there's a considerable amount of grading to make that happen, and then some drainage that we have to work through as well. Here's a way less cool picture of the site plan, a little bit less color, but it does show, in dark shading some of the roadways, especially of how people will come in and out of this site, how residents will access it, as well as the public. So you can see there's essentially two different avenues here. Again, residents are inside their development, maneuvering in the development, and then there's a separate, essentially roadway. An important part, and County engineer noted this, Mr. Smith mentioned this, but we have been working with neighbors, and we have had a neighborhood meeting, and one of the questions was on access as well. And so there's 18 driveways that will be proposed off of this development to service each of those parcels to the east. So whether or not the grades work, whether they want to connect to that road is a different question, but it will be at least what we can do. We have made that provision to make sure that there's a driveway connection, there's a curb cut, and it's there. And so that's all along Chocolate Drive to service the residents to the east. Okay, so the slope analysis. So this really starts to tell a little bit of the story of the hillside that we're working with in terms of the grading. So the areas in red are significant grades. So those are 30% more or greater. So that's a pretty steep slope. So most of our project avoids these areas. It's not very advantageous to anybody to get in there and try to grade any of this out. There is some pockets where we do touch it, but the majority of the project resides in less slopes than that. But it is a steep slope development. Okay, so talking about community benefits. So affordable housing is obviously a big part of this project. The paved Chocolate Drive that we've talked a lot about today, it's improved emergency services, the waste management, utilities. There's also a water tank that's located on the south side of this project. So Sun Valley GID has access and improved access to maintain their project that they have in their facilities as part of this project. Dust control, just in general, access will be improved when you pave it. And then that sidewalk system, which again is going to connect this development to the nearby school and allow for pedestrians to traverse that way. So safer walkways. There is going to be another note that was brought up in the neighborhood meeting was security and what happens with management and how is this going to be maintained. And there is full-time on-site property management that will be provided by this development. The trailhead, so this has been discussed at length today. And so that trailhead you can see here on the right side of the page, that has been provided by this project and is included in the project packet. Again, that's established access where somebody can park and access the open space. It'll limit some of the dumping and various access points that are there today. It'll kind of centralize it a little bit more and make it easier for maintenance. And then a note at the end here is really about the restricted rents as it relates to the affordable aspect of this project. So drainage. So this was brought up extensively during our discussion with the neighborhood meeting. There's a lot of unmitigated runoff that comes down from this development. We've had some pretty significant storms in northern Nevada this fall and winter. So right now, we've got 350 acres of runoff that comes down this hillside right into where Chocolate Drive will reside. And so today that runoff has nowhere to go except to continue on its way into the development. So with this project, Chocolate Drive will capture that runoff. We have a series of detention basins we have to do to meet the stormwater management requirements of Washoe County. But more importantly, it's going to convey that runoff, attenuate it, slow it down, organize it a little bit more so it doesn't flow uncontrolled into the neighborhood. So this is a significant improvement to drainage. It's a significant improvement to water quality. And it'll allow us to control that runoff and put it in a place where it's supposed to go in ditches and storm drains and such. And we're working actively with staff on where some of that's going to go. Several project meetings have happened on this project, including this one today, but we've had, as I mentioned, a neighborhood meeting where there was a lot of good feedback from the community, and we took a note down of every item that was discussed and prepared a response to each of those items. We've met with regional parks. We've had several conversations with Washoe County Engineering. This is obviously a complicated project in terms of infrastructure, as most projects are these days. And we've had a couple of questions about access easements and how we're going to do that. And we have proposed a way that we can build Chocolate Drive without having to go and onto their property where if they are not willing to provide the easement back. And that was clearly stated by Washoe County Engineering earlier in the presentation. The last bit here, so the agency coordination, again, this project has seen a lot of hands in it, which is great. A lot of, we appreciate, and we talked about this earlier this week, just the back and forth and the robust conversation and the collaboration with staff. And it is a complicated project, but it has been a really cool project in that there's been a lot of obstacles, especially I'm an engineer and we've had to overcome quite a few of them. We have been in conversation with Sun Valley General Improvement District, so I know there's questions earlier about water rights and how water is going to happen, and so we have a plan with them on how we will. There's an improvements that need to be made for sewer and water, and they've noted what needs to be done. They've done a study, and that's part of what we're working with them right now. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Ryan, and thank you.
Ryan Rogers with Petcore Investments, for the record. Thank you. As you can tell, it is very difficult to develop affordable housing. So we really appreciate having worked with staff to get through these various obstacles. This development, I'll go a little bit just to give you a little bit about financing. This is going to be a 221 HUD D4 finance development. We do have an award of home funds from the Washoe County Home Consortium for 240 affordable units. So this development, as you can see here, is going to be set at 240 units. It is starting that process now. So we currently in our pipeline are hoping to close on the finances for this by the fourth quarter of this year. So that is unpredictable and that is HUD. So sometimes that can go fast and sometimes it goes slow, but that's our current projections. I did want to touch on just a few of the points that were brought up, particularly open space. First of all, I would like to note that technically this is private property as it exists right now. So technically anybody traversing that to get to Red Hill is technically trespassing. There is no open access to the public from this property as it's private. So all along, and again, some of the things that might have been said early on, as we've gone through these various meetings, we start with concept plans. So we haven't submitted anything for formal approval for site plan. We knew all along that we wanted to work to preserve an actual legal open access to Red Hill. We just didn't know what that would look like. So through that process, we were adamant that we were going to work with Parks to provide that. And what's kind of happened as we provided that, Parks has now wanted to put certain restrictions on what can go there. So to no fault of our own, I want to say is that we want it as open as it can be. And those are restrictions that are being put on there for the benefit, I think, of Red Hill itself and in terms of what use will be there. But I think it should be noted that we are providing an access that technically, legally, currently doesn't exist. So we think that that's an added benefit to the community to have that space there to be able to use from now and throughout the future, as it will be restricted to that use to the extent that Washoe County Parks determines it should stay that way for infinitely. The other thing is, again, the students, as you can see through this process, we did have to reach out to Washoe County School Corporation, who indicated, and I don't know how they do calculations, but typically they do calculations, and then they just provide us a notice of whether they have any comment or opposition to the project. And we didn't have any response we had a response that they didn't have any opposition to the development through this process. So we really didn't provide any of our own internal calculations, which I could do from developments, because other than I think a comment we had at a public hearing, we really hadn't had any opposition for the amount of students that might be coming into the school system for this development. Lastly was traffic, and I think you can see what we're proposing we think is going to greatly provide an increased mobility for a lot of different services and workers throughout Washoe County and the residents who live there. We do have a number of individuals that reach out to us that are happy about the fact that this road will get paved. It'll allow services to go through there without delay. It will also restrict the kind of dust and everything that's stirred up through the area as traffic goes through there. I know that traffic is always a concern. I think you can see from where our entrances are for our development, where our main and the paved roads are 2nd and 5th, that although people could drive through other roads, there's no ability to stop anybody driving on whatever road they choose. It doesn't make a lot of sense from route, point to point driving on what people would take in order to get in our development. The main entrance is off 2nd Avenue. 2nd Avenue and Sun Valley Boulevard has a light. Most of the people would go through that route. It's paved all the way to our main entrance. On the north side, as we are working to finish the pavement from where 5th Avenue ends pavement to pave it to the rest of the way to our development, will be the second paved entrance potentially for our development. So that would create 2 paved entrances to our development that would go all the way to Sun Valley Boulevard. So there really wouldn't be a need to use any of the interior roads unless you're going a zigzag route to get to your final destination, which isn't what most people are going to do when they're going from point A to point B. So we think we've done a pretty good job of addressing how the traffic's going to flow in and out of our development. And we hire a third party in order to do the traffic study, which we're assuming that they're taking the standards that are required of them by Washoe County in order to determine what those counts are going to be and how they're going to operate. So we get that report, we provide it to Washoe County, and we do what's necessary according to that report in order to allow traffic to flow as it should flow before our development went into existence. So again, I'm Ryan Rogers with PetCor, and I'll be here for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Stanley.
Question for the applicant, maybe 2. The demographics you anticipate for the folks that you'll be serving with this project?
Yes. So typically affordable housing, we cater towards young professionals, service workers, retail, firefighters, paramedics. We would be, for this development in particular, we would be targeting individuals that make between about $40,000 to $67,000 as their income. We are income restricted, so they have to be within that. That does change yearly because it's driven by HUD data that's provided determining what those cap limits are. And with inflation, those limits typically are going up as the years go by, now much faster than they were before. So that's typically what we find are being used in our development, and why that need is there, because right now retail workers, those types of young professionals trying to start their careers, are having a very difficult time living and working in the communities that they want to be in.
And along with that, how would you assess the number of school-aged children? It doesn't sound like that would be high, but what's your analysis on that?
Well, and I could provide you something of a portfolio analysis. I don't have that on me, but typically I would probably say you're looking at about a 0.5 for a 2-bedroom apartment. It's very low, almost minuscule for a 1-bedroom. Usually it'd be a newborn and somebody who may be in transition. And then it's usually about two children for a 3-bedroom apartment.
Okay, so what's the math on that?
That would be, let's see here, 96 plus 60. So about 156 children for the development.
All right.
And again, there's a lot of flux in that. We also are, because we have rent restrictions, we also have to document the family size because that's how the rents are determined. So unlike some market rate developments, we have a tighter control on how many individuals are in each unit. That's required to be underwritten every single year that they remain in the unit. So there are also some parameters in restricting, overfilling an apartment with bedrooms. That's why the numbers I don't know if they look small or big, but that's about where they land.
Okay. And I would assume that some of that design is driven by qualifying for the home consortium funding and so forth?
Well, yes, that would be, it's in addition to that, it's, we would get 4% tax credits that's administered by the Nevada Housing Division and tax exempt bonds. And the consortium funds are HUD home funds, or federal home funds. And all of those together would require us to do these types of intake when we're taking in individuals in order to document their income to make sure that they qualify for these paying lower rents, and that we limit the number of individuals in each unit.
Okay, and those are federal programs, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Kathy Julian.
Mr. Christensen, go ahead.
For the record, excuse me, Don Christensen. I'm concerned about the drainage, okay? I see on illustration on page 7, there are 2 detention basins. I'm concerned about ownership and maintenance of the stormwater infrastructure. I have a lot of experience in other projects where that becomes a real burden potentially on the county. So this is a project, tell me if I'm wrong, this is a project that is wholly owned. It's not a condominium where it's going to have multiple ownership. Is that correct?
Excuse me. Yeah, it's one owner of the entire development. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so they're responsible for ownership and maintenance of these drainage ponds or basins and the associated drainage.
For on-site, yeah, for the on-site, for anything that's on our site. So for our loan, we would be vetted by HUD. HUD has to vet our, development to determine what, not just them, but also an equity group.
Okay, pardon me, you need to use the microphone, I can't hear.
Sorry, Brian Rogers with Petcore Investments. So things like cost of maintenance are typically vetted by our lender and the equity group that would come in as part of the partners of this development in the ownership. So the things they would look at are, what is the potential future cost of maintenance? So typically we'll have reserves and all kinds of different things that we will have to consider in our budget in order for the upkeep for different parts of the development that we need to maintain throughout the ownership period.
And Brent Nassick, Kimley Horn. So one note about the maintenance, there is a Chocolate Drive component to this that Mr. Smith and staff noted earlier will be a county road. So there's some county-owned facilities within that right-of-way, but everything outside of that, such as the detention basins that are on the site, will be privately maintained. And so those will be worked through with staff as part of our grading permit and as part of our stormwater management permit, and those will be privately maintained.
That answers most of my question. The last part of that would be the outflow from these basins. Where does that go?
So right now, as you know, like the full hydrology study, so when we looked at this, everything's coming down the hillside and it's coming straight into the development. So we're going to capture that in a series of channels and storm drains, and it's going to get funneled into these detention basins. The outlet control structures will control that runoff to release it to a smaller rate, so these ponds will stage up, and then it's going to head mainly to the north is where the drainage will go. And we're working through with the county on how the capacity of that system that we're putting into and evaluating, if there needs to be changes to that system to allow for greater capacity. It's certainly directing runoff away from the development or from the existing residences. And on the west side of Chocolate Drive is where all the ditches and stormwater management facilities are, and then it's taking the runoff to the north.
So it's safe for me to infer that this is definitely a stormwater improvement where the water isn't just going to flow into the neighborhood as it has in the past. So there is going to be eventually a connection to the existing county stormwater system.
Yes. And part of the project, what we've done now is we've identified the hydrology, we have identified the stormwater management. When we get into final construction drawings and final improvement plans, the county will review our stormwater calculations, the capacity that we're showing, We have to show conformance with the code in terms of how much we're releasing versus how much is allowed, and then where that's going. And so there's going to be a additional scrutiny after today, a lot more scrutiny. Right now, we haven't provided a full drainage report yet because it's not necessary at this stage, but we've done a lot of the calculations to identify it, the infrastructure that's going to be required. And so when we get into final grading plans and final improvement plans to include Chocolate Drive, there's going to be additional calculations that show where this runoff, how it's being handled. So. Okay.
Hi, Ariana Wolf for the record with Kimley Horn Engineering. I have worked closely on this project as well, and I did want to say a little bit of a clarification. There are 2 on-site detention basins. Those were designed simply to offset the detention that is coming from the actual development. As we continued working with Washoe County, we had to decide to help offset additional runoff that was just going completely unchecked into all those properties. And we actually worked with them to size 2 additional basins more south of our development that have nothing to do with the on-site development runoff, but just to help capture some of the flow that's going in so that we can help maintain and just significantly improve the stormwater that's going out there right now. I will say it is a massive problem, and we've looked at this closely with Washoe County. We've done site visits, field visits, and we haven't even done a drainage report yet. So we have looked at this very closely, and this will not solve everything. It is a huge problem. However, we are working with them, and this will be a significant improvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. I believe you had a question.
Yes, just following up on that, and pardon my ignorance, what exactly will a detention basin look like, let's say, in a very wet period of season? What will it look like physically?
Yeah, so a detention basin, what it does, it's a depression. It's not intended in probably other climates in the country. There might be water in it all the time. Normally in northern Nevada, there won't be any water in these detention basins at all. It'll be dry, and there's going to be landscaping, and it will have to meet the requirements of the county code in terms of how the slopes are maintained and stabilized. So what you'll see is a small depression that's out there. In some cases, in some of the spots in the development, it's a little bit bigger. It's a big depression. As water comes into the development and it gets captured by channels and storm drains and such, that pond will start to fill up. And so what we do is we'll run calculations to understand, is it we look at several different storm events to include a 100-year event. What happens to this pond? And it eventually will fill up to a point where it will start to spill into the outlet control structure, and that thing just controls the runoff and sends it, at a metered rate over time instead of all of it coming at once. So there will be, in larger events, there will be water in these stormwater basins, which is good because that's the point of it. We want to hold this runoff instead of sending it uncontrolled somewhere. We're going to hold it, let the storm event continue and pass, and then it will retain that water for a period of time after the storm event, and it allows it to slowly meter it out and, allows the system to have the right capacity to convey it.
Okay, thank you. And last question is, one of the comments from the public was on the increased traffic coming from these residents. Did you consider speaking with RTC about bus service that might actually come by the units?
Yeah, and our traffic engineer that prepared the traffic report is here tonight, and he can speak to the data that was presented and a little bit of the calculations that were behind there. So if you don't mind, I would like to turn it over to David. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is David Jockman with Kimley Horn for the record. Your question was about RTC bus service. So with every traffic study we submit, that is shared with the RTC for their comment as well. It is ultimately up to the RTC to decide where they would like to provide bus service. So that is not a recommendation or a decision made by a traffic study. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for the representative.
Mr. Chair, before you go to public comment, if I could ask Ms. Picard to stand up and clarify one of the questions asked by the board regarding the off-vehicle traffic. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you. For the record, Faye Marie Picard, Park Planner for Washoe County. I misinterpreted the question that was asked earlier, so I do want to clarify my response. I believe the question is if there is a legal document that's restricting off-road vehicles for the Red Hill open space, and that is correct. Washoe County received this land from the American Land Conservancy, and a deed restriction of prohibiting the use of off-road vehicles on the Red Hill open space is in play. So legally, we're not wanting to perpetuate any illegal activity on the Red Hill open space itself. I thought the question was more towards, is there physical barriers that are out there right now restricting the accessibility to that area? And that answer is there's limited physical barriers currently on that open space area. But in general, this is a illegal activity on the Red Hill open space, is the use of off-road vehicles. If that clarifies, if I can restate that at all, let me know. And then just one more comment that I do want to state too. Washoe County is interested in having an easement dedicated to ourselves for parks and open space in order for that trailhead. Just want to make sure that's also clarified as well. And let me know if there's any other questions.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for? Sure, Mr. Christensen.
Courtney, is that correct? Forgive me. One really quick question. My hearing is not the best. Did you say that off-road vehicles were a legal use, as it exists now, or an illegal use?
It is an illegal use, so it is not allowed. It's prohibited on the off-road. The use of off-road vehicles on the open space area is prohibited.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the representatives? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that, and we'll open it up to public comment. We'll go to staff and ask if there's anyone in chambers or via Zoom wishing to speak at this time.
I have Luis Godoy in chambers. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Luis Godoy. Sorry, my mouth is dry here. Just want to speak really quick. One of the things, and I appreciate you guys being here, long day for you guys. One of the things I brought up, and this proves the point, we're fighting a giant here. They have money, they have resources we can't do. I brought up regarding the andesite buckwheat, Aragonium robustum. I spoke with Janelle Johnson I had an email with Dr. Borokini as well from the Nevada Division of Natural Heritage, who brought up concerns regarding this and stated and sent them to them saying that there is this buckwheat on there. Reasons I bring this is I'm a native Nevadan, born here. One of the things that brings Washoe County, one of the things notable for are certain species like this found in certain spots, Red Hill, bases of Peavine and up in Virginia City. One of the things that Dr. Weisberg at UNR, expert in this also, he said, he did a previous study, said development of all stressors in comparison to fire or drought is actually the biggest concern on that. Just because it's not, maybe like they mentioned, it's not on the land, around it, surrounding, all of this development affects it. So I'm just mentioning that. And it was brought up previously by the previous commission or the planning commission, who they're the ones brought it up and actually denied the rezoning. One of the things I want to mention also is with regards to the detention. I know there's earthquake fault lines on there. If I saw some of these plannings, there's 2 earthquake fault lines along there that are going to be built or disturbed somehow. I'm not sure. I'm not a seismologist. I'm a scientist now, but I do think that when you start building and messing on land, it is going to affect earthquake fault lines possibly in a certain way. And if these water detentions are there, where's the flooding for us residents that now live, downstream of these? They have landscaping going on and everything. We're already taxing our natural resources here in the desert. And I'm going to speak briefly as an former EMS person. When I was working back 15 years ago, we were taxed in the hospital. Increasing population is just only going to tax our first responders, law enforcement. They mentioned they have money and allocations and everything. Again, we can't fight it. That's why they have all this, people here. I'm taking time out of my PhD. I do life-saving research on cardiac function. I'm taking time out of that to be here because that's how important this is to me, to be here, to speak on behalf of everybody. I've read reviews on Pedcore online briefly, all negative with regards to property management, the way they run, the people that live there have all complaints about them. How is that going to change now? And even people that work for them have mentioned how bad this corporation is. This is our community. Please protect it. Please listen to the people. Please listen to your community. Please save Sun Valley.
I have Carol Burns in Chambers. Please state your name for the record, Carol.
My name is Carol Burns, and I'm a resident of Sun Valley since 1970, and I'm also on the CAB of Sun Valley. I would like to start out with the master plan for Sun Valley. The vision of Sun Valley was to manage growth and its associates' impacts on Sun Valley. Sun Valley, let's see. Open vistas of the surrounding ridges and public lands managed by BLM and Washoe County are an important characteristic of the Sun Valley planning area. Retaining these lands as open space and continued access to these lands is paramount to the valley's character. To maintain open vistas of the surrounding ridges and hills and minimize the visual impact of hillside development, structures shall be located to eliminate or minimize silhouettes against the skyline. I read this to the Planning Commission when we started on this, and this is when they denied this proposed development. However, the county commissioners approved it because they said we need low-cost housing. I don't think $40,000 to $60,000 a year. That doesn't seem like low-cost housing to me. But I would like to mention, we're talking about the buckwheat up there. In the original development plan or proposal that was before the Planning Commission, there is also a bat cave up there. And of course, if this development goes in, that's the end of the bat cave as well. The last two approvals, one August 21st and the other one, we never heard anything about it, or we would have been there. Like I say, this was approved by the anyway. I would like to also mention that the Petco company is not a desirable business that we want in our area. If you would go online, there are 30 pages of complaints about this company. They're from Indiana. They go around the United States and develop these proposals or developments. And after 5 years, they leave. They're saying, "Oh, we're going to be there forever." They are not going to be there forever. They're talking about pools. I guess I'm supposed to stop.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Burns. We appreciate it.
I have Mark Newman in Chambers. Please state your name for the record.
Can you help me out for a minute? There. Me too. Oh, gotta do it this way. Okay. Will work better this way. I don't know. For the record, Mark Newman. I'm a Sun Valley resident. I'm also a resident of Washoe County for better than 60 years, and I've seen some developments over the years. My father is a contractor. I made my living on construction, so I'm not against construction. I just like to see some construction done properly. As you can see here in the picture, this is the proposed development. Right down here is 2nd Street, and right here is where the elementary school is, and here's the existing water tank that's going to be servicing this and most of that neighborhood. As you can see through here, there's all kinds of trails, and the main runoff comes down. It's going to be coming down right through their main project. As you can see also with their black arrows, they have one coming off of Chocolate Drive, where Chocolate Drive continues all the way to 7th Street. You have 5th Street, you have Gifford, 4th Street, and 2nd Street. 2nd Street, they're claiming, is going to be the only entrance because it's the only one that's paved all the way through. This is what worries me with people walking to the bus stop and any of the children that need to go to Gifford Park to play at Gifford Park to play baseball or anything else. Right here is where you're coming through and they're exiting. Their exit to their, this whole entire complex exits right into Gifford Parkway. Gifford Parkway is a little tiny dirt road right now. The only one that's actually wide and paved with sidewalks is 2nd Street. 4th Street, 5th Street are not paved, very wide, and nor do they have any kind of a sidewalk or any access. So anybody leaving these apartment complexes and walking down any one of those streets to get to the bus stop on Sun Valley Drive, going to have a major problem, because if you got emergency vehicles coming up, you have to almost pull into the ditch as it is right now. Those roads are going to need to be improved. And finally, on this one here, you can see where on the top of their color right here, you can see where the main runoffs through all of those ditches. So all the main runoffs are already going to be going right into their apartment complex. When they talk about traffic at 96 cars per AM and 122 cars per PM, but they're putting parking spots in for 470 cars. That's only 218 cars that they're talking about doing any traffic. I don't know about you guys, but when I go to work and I came home from work, I generally go out again. So now you're talking about an extra trip, and they're talking all of it just going on to 2nd Street. As Sun Valley Drive as it is now in the morning, it backs all the way up to 4th Street. Do you think these cars are all going to just sit there and wait to get let in? They're going to be taking 4th Street and Gifford. They're not going to go all the way down to 5th Street and then try to go all the way around. So there need to be some infrastructure improvements and badly before this whole development takes place. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no further public comment in chambers. Via Zoom, I have Kathy. If you could please unmute and state your first and last name for the record.
Hi, yes, I'm Kathy Simeon. I just want to ask, have any of you gone without having your garbage picked up for 5 weeks? I have. I have. We don't have garbage picked up because Chocolate is a muddy mess, number one. Waste Management comes out, and because it's a muddy mess, they will put containers out on Gapford on 5th. And then people in Sun Valley will put all of their trash in those containers. We can't put our trash in there. We can't get medical people come out. I can't get, utility people to come out. It's ridiculous. And I am all for just plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have one further public comment in chambers. Miss, if you could please state your first and last name for the record. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm Sue Boyd. I live on West 4th Street, and I can't believe you guys think that nobody's going to be going at 4th Street to go to this place. And the road is very damaged right now after this winter, and I can't imagine that you're not going to be having all your construction trucks driving up 4th Street. And it's a mess as it is, and this whole thing is just unbelievable. And the security issue that they brought up, he spoke to the security at the project and then said there would be 24-hour management on the property. But there's not going to be, I think we addressed this at another meeting, there is no security on the project. So, there's a lot of illusion going on here. And this is a huge project. And I don't know if we need to put a sign at the bottom of the hill. This is a private road, no construction vehicles, to protect that road. Or is that going to be taken into consideration, the people on 4th Street? I see now they're going to do 5th Street. I mean, I would just assume the whole project went away, but we voted that way initially, and then, of course, the commission overrode that with a acceptance. So very, very discouraging to be railroaded, but it happens a lot. So thanks for hearing me.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our public comment in chambers, and I have no further hands raised via Zoom.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. I do have one quick question. Maybe Mr. Rogers, if you can come up, maybe you're the right person, or maybe your traffic representative. If you're going to have 240 units there, I want to make sure I understand this. So you're going to have at least 2 ingress and egress locations, 5th Street and 2nd Street? Or are you looking at moving all the traffic when they leave onto 2nd Street?
I believe in the plans from the traffic report, it's all coming out of the Second Avenue, what we would call entrance. That's the main entrance for the clubhouse. The 5th Avenue would be a second emergency access right now, and we would be paving that road from where Chocolate Drive, as its completion would go, to the 5th Avenue that is currently paved. So traffic would head from our development, all have to come out towards the south portion and head to 2nd Avenue.
Is there, I'm going to ask this straight up, is there room for consideration to at least have 2 exit points, 2nd and 5th Street?
I'm not sure about that in the plans.
Because to be honest with you, and just as it stands at this moment in time, for all of the residents to come out onto 2nd Street and go down 2nd Street, that's a lot of congestion going down there. At least if you have 2 locations where they can decide which direction they want to come out to. 5th, which is a larger road. I drove the area today, so I'm familiar with it. And at least if you go down to 5th Street, you can definitely get out onto Sun Valley. And if you go down 2nd Street, you can get out onto Sun Valley also. And actually both streets, I know there was some sort of discussion earlier that 5th Street's not paved. 5th Street is paved, and it ends right there at Chocolate, just like 2nd Street does also. So I would be more in favor of allowing at least 2 points of entry and exit from your development rather than trying to push everybody right down onto 2nd Street. But if someone can answer that question for me, maybe I got it wrong, and there is going to be 2 ways to get in and out. So.
Yeah, Brent Nassett with Kimley Horn. So we are not restricting access onto 5th. The traffic study evaluated vehicles going to 2nd because that was the likeliest path of travel when you looked at the distribution of traffic. But there is not a restriction from residents leaving the development to go, as we mentioned, anywhere, really. I mean, any of these roads could be used. They will likely take the path that is going to be the quickest, which is likely 2nd. So that's when we looked at in the traffic study on 2nd. But there is not going to be a permanent barrier to 5th Street at all for this project. It'll be accessible for emergency, and we're required to have 2 points of ingress and egress for emergency. So that's there for that. But when we look at the evaluation of 2nd, that would be the most likely thoroughfare for vehicles leaving and going back to Sun Valley Boulevard.
Okay. I'm not looking for the emergency entrance or exit, i.e. those are usually gated and then they're ungated, they're opened up when there's
a reason for it. I'm looking at actually potentially two locations of 240 unit complex to be able to decide which way is best for them to get out and get onto Sun Valley, because we do know that Sun Valley is in fact getting crowded right now. So, Mr. Smith, I believe you want to jump in here.
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, and I certainly don't mean to push aside the consultants for the developer, but I think traffic is something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I want to kind of set some understanding here. We can talk about numbers and we can talk about those things, but I first want to start out and let you know, of course, that any development in Washoe County is going to comply with Washoe County's design standards, including this project. So we are requiring them to use the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, 11th edition design manual for multifamily housing to determine the number of trips generated for this project. So I looked at those numbers as well, and I had the same thought. But I went back and I verified that they're following the correct best practices under the current engineering design standards. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, number one. Number two, as part of this project goes in, when we looked at this, when they first came to us and we looked at this, we wanted to make sure that there was several things met, several considerations met. Primary access is always key. That has to be designed and built to Washoe County standards. And if there's off-site improvements that are required, those off-site improvements will be done and will be paid for by the developer. The second thing that we look for is emergency access. Now, in some conditions, and I bet you've seen projects, I know you've seen projects where there has been secondary emergency access. And in a lot of those cases, those areas are gated, right? So you'll see a 20-foot wide paved, because it has to meet the requirements for axle loading. It has to meet the requirements for the fire protection district. It has to meet the requirements for the emergency service providers, not just to gain access themselves, but for residents to evacuate areas under certain conditions. So we have rigorous requirements, all of us do, the fire department, us, et cetera, to make sure that those secondary emergency accesses meet those standards. In this case, this development, like all, have to have secondary access. That is 5th Street. It is not going to be gated. It is not going to be restricted. It is a secondary access. I just want to be clear, don't get hung up on the term secondary emergency. It is access. So this will allow for the distribution of traffic as we see fit. The gentleman, apologize if your name just dropped down on my brain. It's been a long day as well. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Newman. Mark Newman.
Mr. Newman and I have spoken prior outside board meeting before, and he brings up a great point. There needs to be adequate sidewalks and transportation pathways throughout this area. Every time we see new development come in, we condition them to make those necessary improvements. But we cannot condition every development to do everything, right? So Washoe County also has a good history in the Sun Valley area of seeking grants to construct sidewalks, to construct other accesses. We've seen that. CDBG comes to mind. Community Development Block Grant Programs. So those are things that I'm committed to, and our department is committed to as we continue to see the needs grow in this area, in other areas of Washoe County too. So it's not just Sun Valley, we're looking at all areas as well. But I just wanted to step in, and I apologize, I don't mean to cut anybody short, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it's our requirements that are going to be met with this project. We're going to review those traffic control plans that are going to be put into place when they identify what their haul routes are. So don't forget about haul routes with construction. We're going to make sure that those meet our requirements. If they damage Washoe County infrastructure during construction on those haul routes, they fix that. So we go out, we inspect, we video, and we make sure that the haul routes are identified. That's where the construction traffic goes. We make sure that ultimately that the development meets the minimum ITE requirements per our design manual. We've had those discussions with the traffic engineers. So I wanted to give you a little bit of clarity on those things. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, just make sure I understood you correctly and the board members understood you correctly, that
there will be free access at two locations, 2nd Street and 5th Street, to come in and out of that project.
Yes, there will not be an emergency access gate or control on the new Chocolate Drive as it enters Fifth Street.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification on that. Mr. Stanley?
Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith, before you get gone, one additional area of clarification. There was some concern, if you don't mind, there was some concern about traffic on unpaved roads. Is there, and I know, as you said, you're excited about getting Chocolate paved properly. Are there plans for those, some of the other roads? I think there's one that starts with a G, maybe Gibson.
Gufford.
That, are there any plans on your books, maybe apart from this project, but on your books for paving some of those roads?
Not currently.
Thank you.
Okay, bringing it back to the board for further discussion.
May I ask, this is Kathy Julian for the record, may I ask Mr. Smith a follow-up question on that, on the construction vehicles?
Absolutely.
Is it in the capacity of the county to tell the construction vehicles that they cannot go on those unpaved roads? And who owns those unpaved roads like Gephardt or Gepson or whatever? Is that private roads or are those county roads?
Can you do the overhead? Commissioner, give me just a second. I had kind of anticipated maybe your question just a little bit. I'm hoping that you can see this on the overhead. So to answer your question, your first part of the question, will construction traffic be able to randomly drive anywhere they want to drive? And the answer is no. That's what a traffic control plan with a haul route that's required for every project that will be put in place. Have we had issues in the past where maybe one of the drivers wasn't aware of that? Yes. Will that occur on this project? I would guarantee you that something will happen, but at that point, we have conversations. We have conversations with our contractor partners, with the developer, with those representatives to address those issues. No.
Dwayne, just let us know which one, which slide.
I've got my little tablet here.
Oh, the doc cam, got it. That's the best we can do.
Commissioner, I don't know if you can see that. Well, that helps a little bit. So right here on the edge, this is the project, right? And this is the existing easement, which is Chocolate Drive, the dirt area. This is 5th. This is 2nd down here. You can see how 2nd is blue, and you can see how some of these other roads are blue, but you can see where Gephardt stops here, and it's not blue to the west. Blue represents Washoe County-owned roadways. So those are the roadways that are in our current inventory. Those are the roads that we repair. We clean the roadside ditches. We plow snow. We do all those things that are expected of the community because those roadways are built to Washoe County standards, so therefore we can accept them. The other dirt road areas in here are also access easements, just like Chocolate Drive is. So those are not part of this project. And Commissioner Stanley, you asked me, do I have any plans or does Washoe County have any current plans to do any paving through these areas? And like I said, no, but it doesn't mean that we haven't and continue to look for grant opportunities and funding sources and other ways to make improvements to our communities. Because this is an area where we have a pretty good history of it, but there's a whole lot more that we could do. I hope that helps answer your question, Commissioner.
Thanks.
Okay, bring it back to the board for discussion.
I think it's a good project. I know there are some drawbacks, and there are with everything, but we need affordable housing. And county commissioners and regional and everybody has already changed all the zoning. I have no hesitation in approving this.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen.
I concur with my colleague at the end of the podium. I've lived in this area for over 40 years. I've watched Sun Valley expand and contract in its growth, and I heartily agree about affordable housing. And I'm quite familiar with this particular location. I think this is a quality development that will enhance the lives of many people in that area and those that would come and live there. This is probably the very edge of the development for reasons of the topography, but I think the developer and the owners have pretty well addressed the drainage problem, which is always a problem in our desert. Yes, there are problems, but I think overall, I can do nothing but support this this project as written.
Thank you. Let me step in here real quick too. First of all, what I'd like to say is I'd like to congratulate staff for, I thought there was a very thorough job on this. I thought you addressed the points point by point, and the positions that you took were well laid out, so I do appreciate that. On top of that, I also want to take a moment and also thank the applicant who actually supplied some clarifying information and some good supporting documentation, along with other representatives from Washoe County. And that is not to exclude anybody from the Sun Valley area of their taking their time out of their busy day to come here and express their point of view too. I think that's also very important. That being said, it would appear to me that looking through the document in and of itself, when it came to conditions, what I found very interesting in the years that I have been on this board was the amount of conditions that were required for this project to go forward. They were extensive. They were 8 pages of conditions. And in all my years here, I have never seen 8 pages of conditions. 43% of all the agencies that were contacted actually responded with conditions on this project. So it wasn't myopic in nature. It was looked at by a whole bunch of different people and a whole bunch of different entities that had insight to make sure that if this is voted on in favor, that it's going to be a quality project when it is ultimately done. In addition to that, I do give the applicant credit that they went beyond what they needed to do when they were out actually contacting the property owners. I believe 30 owners were originally required to be contacted, and there was 128 that were contacted. And then I believe second to that, also 202 notices went out, which I thought was pretty impressive. So there was a large contingency of the Sun Valley area residents that at least were notified of what was going on here. In addition to that, I went out there today. I did take a ride out there, and I did look at Chocolate Drive and came up both 2nd Street and up 5th Street and saw some of the area where this is going to go, and I believe it to be truly advantageous that when it is done, if Chocolate Drive is paved, if they can work with the landowners to have a irrevocable offer of dedication to Washoe County, I think that would help Chocolate Drive in and of itself. That would help to eliminate some of the runoff, some of the waste management issues and everything else. So I am in favor of this project. I do believe that it will ultimately be a good thing. I also give credit to the to the representatives that you're right, with the change in the master plan, as it did change, the maximum density would have been 850 units by that change, and they're asking for 240. And it's not too often that you see developers go more toward the minimum rather than the maximum when they want to take full advantage of their assets that they have afforded to them. There was no objections by the Truckee Meadow Fire Protection District, the Washoe County School District, the Washoe County Emergency Medical Services Oversight Program, or the Washoe County Sheriff's Office when they were given information on this project, which I think also is a plus in favor, that there was nothing that was outstanding or a real concern to them. So with that, and there's more here, one other thing I think that was interesting too, and they do talk about the heights of the buildings. Having been on this board, height and distance becomes a factor when we deal with a lot of our issues that are here. So over time, what I've done is I've actually come into this room with a tape measure, and I've measured things out, so I got a better idea of distance. From that gate right there to that gate right there is 32 feet. That's the maximum height of the buildings for your apex of your roof. So it's not overly high, in my opinion, compared to a lot of other projects that we get requests for. So it gives me a visual, if you stand on end, about what you would be getting. And of course, you're not really going back up the hill, getting further and further up. So those are some of the factors that I took into account or would take into account, and I would be in favor of this project as what has been presented to us here today. Is there any other?
Yes,
comments?
Kathy Jillian for the record. I agree. I'm very supportive of affordable housing, and this looks to be an excellent opportunity for affordable housing. I also acknowledge, though, the concern about things like the access and the issue of the buckwheat. And I do note that there is a condition in the presentation that should they find these plants on that property, there needs to be a revision of a plan or a submission of a plan to Washoe County Regional Parks and Open Space. And it would be interesting, I would hope this would generate some kind of action that would be consistent with the environmental goals here, if that were to happen. But overall, Washoe County needs affordable housing, and especially professionally managed rental housing. So I would support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stanley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleagues on most all of these points. And the driver, as everyone knows, is affordable housing, which is a hard bus to stand in front of. I also want to commend the staff and the planners for an excellent package that makes a very complicated and detailed situation pretty understandable. And I also want to point out that Mr. Smith's input to this was key, I think, as well, to say that it's an advantage to everyone to be able to get in and out of there efficiently. And so I too can support this resolution.
Thank you. If there is no further discussion on this matter, I will entertain a motion.
So we've got, this is Rob for the record, we got two motions, right? Motion for the administrative permit. I move that after giving reasonable consideration to information contained in staff report, information received during the public hearing, the Board of Adjustments approve administrative permit case number WAD-MIN 22-0029 with amended conditions for Pedcore Investments LLC, with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Development Code Section 110.808.25, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effect on a military installation. Do we want to do them both at the same time?
Actually, no, let's go ahead and do them separate.
Let's do them separate, but Mr. Pierce, we are, with your amended conditions, with your motion, are you including the one presented by Mr. Brosnick during his presentation?
Reading it right off of his script.
That he submitted the most recent one. The proposed trailhead shall complete per the amended condition is as follows.
Okay, leave that up there. I'll amend it. The proposed trailheads just disappeared. Trailhead shall be completed per the approved construction improvement drawings prior to the issuance of CFO of the first multifamily building to the satisfaction of the Community Service Department Director of Operations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second on this?
For the record, Don Christensen, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, and then we will move on to the second part of the motion.
This is Rob for the record. This is a motion for the special use permit. I move that after giving reasonable consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 23-0001 with amended conditions for Petcore Investments LLC with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effects on military installation.
Thank you. Is there a second? I will second it. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. But Mr. Lloyd, would you please read the appeal procedure? Thank you.
Somebody stole it. All right, most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and you qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Moving on. Next is chair and board items. First item up is future agenda items. Is there anything the board wishes to add to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to B, requests for information.
I'm sorry, Kathy Julian for the record. I guess you don't see my hand up here.
I'm sorry. No, I did not.
That's okay. I would like to have some discussion of how we deal with neighborhood meetings and how those are reported in the packets. And also when a concern is raised at a neighborhood meeting vis-a-vis, let's say as an example, the schools and impact on schools, it would be helpful if we could have that kind of information when the staff receives a no comment from the school district, yet that comment has been raised by the public in a public meeting. I would hope for more follow-up on such matters. And if we can have a discussion on that, that would be helpful.
We could put an item on the next on a future agenda addressing the neighborhood meetings and addressing public comments, because I think that is something that is a recurring theme that I think we need to address to the board, because there's multiple layers of that, individual projects and as a policy matter in regard to how the CABs are done. And I think that's appropriate for this board to have a separate item that we present on, perhaps in a meeting when we don't have a long agenda. It would behoove us to do that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Large, for that, which just kind of dovetails nicely right into requests for information from staff. So I guess what we talked about here earlier and maybe what we can do is, and I don't know how we go about this. I know it was brought up during tonight's meeting as to having more interaction or hearing more from the public. But I don't know how we can do that to get more information. I would probably just say maybe if staff obviously does get it in, and I believe they do this already, so maybe Mr. Lloyd, you can clarify it. But when we do get information in from staff, a letter or an email or something, it gets attached to the report for us anyway. So I don't think we're falling down there. I think we're pretty good on that. So Mr. Stanley wants to jump in here. So
yeah, I do, because it's an issue you and I spoke about, and it is the idea of the Washoe County School District not responding or not being marked as responding in the matrix, but then pointed out to me that there'd been essentially off-site discussions that didn't have an objection. But when we look at who's reporting and what their comments are, that's what we're looking for. So, you know, I continue to be disappointed that 156 potential school kids impacting one school wasn't addressed either, hey, that we've got plenty of facility for that, or, you know, nope, we're going to have to plan for that.
We can put that on a future agenda and to discuss. I would also say that we can't make our commenters care about certain things.
But you almost have, in a way, if I may. You notice how much better it's getting, and whatever is happening seems to be working. So if we do more of that.
we can't make them condition things.
Yeah. But it is getting better, if I may say so.
Yeah, let me just step in here real quick, and I can understand both sides, but if staff sends something out to an agency and says, do you have any input? This is what's coming. And they get nothing back, then that's all they can say to us is we got nothing back. Now, if a citizen then goes to the school and talks to the principal and says, gee, you know, I'm sorry about that, or gave them some different information, I mean, that's beyond our control. All staff can do is send the information out, request if they have an issue with it to notify us so we can address it. So,
depending on the issue too, we certainly will follow up and pester said reviewing agencies. We often do that as well. But yeah, Mr. Large is correct, and we're under very tight, statutory time limits for these applications, and that becomes part of the equation as well.
I do think that the more input we have from different entities, such as the school board or the sheriff's office or whatever, will help us make better informed decisions, but we've got to go with what we have. So.
And Kathy Julian, for the record, I think it's especially important when in a neighborhood meeting, the public has raised that question. And that falls into what I had mentioned earlier.
Okay, with that, any other requests for information from staff? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Director and Legal Counsel items. Report on previous Board of Adjustment items. Mr. Lloyd?
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. How about legal information and updates, Mr. Large?
No changes in the law.
Thank you. Last but not least is public comment. Staff, do we have someone from the public that wishes to speak?
I have Mark Newman in Chambers. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you.
I will. Good evening. It's been a long afternoon. For the record, my name is Mark Newman. One of the things that I'm on a cab as well, and I go to all the cab meetings throughout Washoe County because I'm also on the Senior Services Citizens Advisory Board cab for District 3. So I go and give presentations at all the different cab meetings throughout Washoe County. And it's the same thing. Years ago, they took all of the voting and rights away from all the cab members. Now they do the public meetings, and under the public meetings, anybody within that area of 750 feet are the ones that get notified. So if he lives 800 feet away from the project that I'm doing, he doesn't get notified of it unless one of his neighbors tells him. And that's how come you don't get a big public outcry at these public meetings, because hardly nobody's notified. And then the county's initiated the hub project. Guarantee you, any one of you, get on the computer tonight when you get home and try to find a development that's going on in the hub system in your area, and when you can make public comments about it. Good luck. It's a heck of a deal. And I'm still worried. My whole thing is the kids that are going to be going down Gifford to get to Gifford Park, and that road isn't going to get improved. And 5th Street, You think you're going to go all the way down to 2nd Street and then go back up Sun Valley Drive? They're going to be cutting down through all those streets. And 2nd Street in the morning, right now, traffic's backed up 15, 20 cars from just the people that live there trying to get on a Sun Valley Drive because that traffic gets backed all the way to 4th Street. And it's going to get really ugly if everybody trying to get out on 2nd Street, they'll be backed up in the parking lot in their apartment trying to get out. It's going to get ugly over there. I don't live on that side. I've just been asked by a lot of the citizens on that side of the valley that have to work since I'm retired to come and speak for them on the behalf of the pedestrians and the children. Because even if it's low income and people have to walk to the bus stop, they're not going to walk down 2nd Street and down. They're going to go down Gifford or 4th or 5th. And none of those have sidewalks, dirt, and drainage. It's going to get ugly for a lot of people on this development. You guys have a great evening. See you the next time.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. We appreciate your input and your willingness to stay so long and talk to us. How about staff? Staff, is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. We are adjourned.